keep it as non-political as we can, understanding that we are talking about very political figures. So, which I imagine that's how you manage to keep your job. We've been alive for 10 seconds. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're thrilled that you're here, and this is going to be a fun show. All right. I think we're just about ready. Fig, you got any questions, comments, Rude? All right,
Do it.
We go. All right, man. I'm going to reset the timer.
Who's introducing Howie? I forgot where we're at.
I can do it. Why don't you pick it up out of the So There I Was tease?
Okay.
Introduce yourself, hand it to me, and I'll mention it because it was Jeff Moss that put us onto you, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was it. Okay. I'm so confused. We've gotten so many referrals lately. I'm like, who's... So, yeah, Jeff Moss, My Leading Edge, a few shows back. In fact, I will get that number real quickly before we go and do that. My Leading Edge was show 149.
What show is this going to be?
154.
4.
Yeah. Yeah. How did that get there? Close those out. All right.
And this is by far a first.
Yeah, it is.
Now I have a line on Air Force One pilot that says he's willing to perhaps come on.
Who's that?
Howie knows him.
His name is Chuck Parker.
No, I don't know him. He was after me.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a United pilot as well.
We're live.
Oh, there you go.
Just saying,
Okay, very good.
All right.
Disregard Al after. So there I was.
He is. Yeah. All right. I'm going to zero out I think the timer is zeroed out here. It is. All right. I'm going to zero it again, and then I'll hit the music, and we'll go live. All right. I just have to find my right buttons. Or not. Okay, that's the problem.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This here is a true story about crossing the pond at night in the world's smallest cockpit on the tanker through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that, thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. There I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond.
So there I was, crossing the pond, and former Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Krulak, who I knew actually from the time he was a full colonel, and this is 40 years ago or so, I was 6'1", 200 pounds, and he said in front of the White House staff, "Howie, why the hell did you join the Air Force?"
Okay, I can't wait to hear how the rest of this goes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to So There I Was. And that is going to be the beginning of an outstanding interview. This is Fig. I am actually blessed to be home today. Where's my co-host?
I am also home in New Hampshire. Repeat here, everybody. And we're thrilled to welcome with us today Howie Franklin, who was referred to us by our show 5 shows ago, show 149, My Leading Edge, Jeff Moss, who I'm not entirely sure how he met you. I'm assuming it's his affiliation with President Carter, but there we have it. Howie Franklin, who served one or 5 presidents aboard Air Force One. Welcome, sir. We're thrilled to have you.
Good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, but you didn't start off traipsing around the world on Air Force One. How is it you wound up going into the Air Force and getting to this path?
Yeah, well, I got to give a lot of credit to God because I didn't plan it, and it all worked out. When I was a young, but time I was born until I was 15. I grew up at Ocean Beach, Fire Island, with my grandfather built houses. And I was around a lot of movie stars. Marilyn Monroe lived down the street from me, her and Joe DiMaggio.
Wow.
I remember they had a big hedgerow around their house, real high hedgerows. And 10-year-old boys, we were trying to peek through the hedgerow because we knew that she was sunbathing on the other side without any clothes on.
Right on.
Yeah.
We never got to see anything like that. But the first marital argument I ever witnessed in my life was Mike Wallace, and his wife's name was Buff Todd. And but I was around a lot of movie stars, and I was not starstruck. I didn't realize that was part of my training. When I was 16, I got a job at Talisman Yacht Club on Fire Island for the jet set of the 60s. And these were high profile. Very few times on Air Force One did I ever have passengers that were at the same power level and financial level of the people at Talisman Yacht Club. And I was a sous chef. I worked for a Hungarian chef, which was my first experience. And this lady had the tattoo on her arm from the concentration camp in Europe.
Oh, wow.
And she was the former head chef of Fontainebleau in Florida. So she was a top chef with an incredible life story. Working for her was a college course just in itself. Her job in the concentration camp was to pull the gold out of the teeth. Okay?
Oh.
So, I mean, I can't emphasize as much as the education. Now I work for an American-Italian chef, a Turkish chef who was the chef for Ahmet Erdogan, who was the president of Atlantic Record Company, and also a Greek chef. And he worked for a guy named Harry Theodore Acropolis, who owned Greek International Line. So I was around all these international people, and I wanted to go see the world. And they were going to put me on a ship as a sous chef, and I was going to go see the world. That was my plan at 19. I got drafted when I was 20, just right after my birthday. And I got a draft notice with myself and 4 other gentlemen at the same time. It said immediate induction when passing physical. It didn't say come down for a test and see how you do.
Oh, boy.
Of course not. I need 5 volunteers to join Marine Corps. You.
Yeah. So going back to that question, when General Krulak said to me, well, Howie, why the hell did you join the Air Force? I said, well, sir, in 1965, when I got drafted, I figured out the United States Air Force, and all due respect to all armed services, believe me, but I still had a choice at that moment. I figured out the United States Air Force is the only armed forces in the United States of America that the enlisted man's not the primary resource to get shot. In the Air Force, they shoot the officers.
That's pretty much spot on.
Right. Well played, sir.
I cannot fault your logic. I can't find any holes in that, sir, at all.
No.
That's pretty spot on.
Right.
Well, the thing is that I put in for food service because I said to Mr. Acropolis, if I do 4 years in food service, can I get on a better ship? And he said, sure, no problem. That was a big deal to me. To him, it was actually nothing.
Right.
So I got in the Air Force food service, very toxic environment. It was not the type of food service I was used to. Everybody hated what they did. I was stationed in Rapid City, South Dakota, and that was not pleasurable for me coming from the South Shore of Long Island. And then I went to Guam. I ended up in the in-flight kitchen, and flight crews liked me, and they wanted me to cross-train. And I said, what do I got to do? They said, well, you're going to have to. No, I said, what do I do? They said, well, you're going to take care of the general and take care of the airplane, fix the meals. I said, I've been doing that all my life. I can do that. He said, well, you're going to have to extend 8 months over your 4-year commitment. I said, no, you got the wrong guy.
I don't think so.
I wanted out as fast as I went in to get out as fast as I could. And they said, well, we want to put you on one flight to see how you like it. When I look back on that, they pulled me out of the food service field and put me in this other field and sent me on a trip. I had a 3-star general and 24 full colonels. Went to Okinawa and spent about 30 hours. My best friend in the Marine Corps was stationed there. He was the only enlisted person living off base because he had married a round-eyed stripper.
Oh, well, that's unique in Okinawa, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Repeat.
This is 1967. Yeah. She was making $350 a week, and he was, you know how those Marine NCOs are. He was loan sharking the money out. He was living good.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Yeah.
And then I go to Taipei, Taiwan for 5 days. It was the time of my life. And the crew kept on joking with me. What are you going to do? They know I like what I'm doing. Okay. The other thing was the first meal on the airplane was a sandwich meal. And I'm from Long Island. I had the Long Island deli sandwich. I gave them a French dip sandwich with about 2 inches of meat on it. And the crew was going, who the hell is this guy? What is this?
Damn.
Hey, Howie.
I didn't know the last guy was giving him a slice of ham and a slice of cheese. So
Can I stop you just for a second and ask a vital question so
Sure.
my brain can cage? What kind of airplane are you flying around on?
KC-97.
KC-97. Thank
Okay.
you.
So what is that exactly?
It's a Boeing Strato Cruiser pre-707.
Okay. Wow.
And look, but I noticed the crew. I went from this toxic environment. The whole flight crew, they love what they do. You know, and the pilot came up and treated me like I was a human being.
How about that?
What the hell was he thinking?
Yeah.
And you know, and so I went from this toxic environment to a happy, everybody enjoys their job environment. That had an impact on me. So we came back off the trip, and the crew was joking. They knew I liked what I was doing, so anyway, he said, well, whatever you do, you still got to go to personnel. I said, for what? They said, well, you got to go collect your per diem. I said, what's per diem? They said, well, they paid you so much a day while you were on the trip. I said, you paid me. I would have paid you to do that.
Yeah. Shh.
about
Don't
that?
repeat that.
There it
Yeah,
is.
All
there's a
right. Yeah.
97.
And then Bago threw up a picture of a Strato Cruiser there. All right.
Well done,
yeah.
Bago. Even with bad internet, he's still back there whipping ass.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's got props and a jet engine on it, Wayne.
No, well, that one does, but we had 4 props, big engines, a lot
Okay.
of oil.
Yeah. If it's
We'll
leaking oil,
fly-
you know it's got some.
Yeah,
And-
we were flying to Japan on one of the trips, and the colonel said to me, looked out the wing, and there's this oil running over the back of the wing. And he said, Sergeant, you look at that. I said, sir, that's good. He said, what do you mean that's good? I said, if there's no oil running over that wing, there's no oil in that engine.
Right.
Hey, Howie, can I assume that the interior of that specific airplane that you were talking about flying on was outfitted like for comfort, not for cargo?
Right. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And, but anyway, I loved it and I enjoyed it. So the general said to me one day, hey, Franklin, you'll make a good master sergeant someday. I said, sir, I'd rather make a better civilian. And he said, well, you're going to Andrews Air Force Base for a TDY and they're going to look at you and you're looking at them. I bring God into it again because so when you got to Andrews, they had 118s, they had Convairs, they had Jetsstars, they had these tankers that were converted into passenger carrying airplanes. We referred to those as Air Force submarines because there was no windows. But anyway, and I get put on the big birds, the 707s, the big 707s.
All right. Oh, he's got one there. All right.
You know?
Yeah, there it is. Yes.
I'm 25 years old, man, and you know I got a lot of culinary experiences that I didn't brag about or anything like that. So the first trip, we go to London for a couple of days. Secretary of State William Rogers. Then we go to Paris for a couple of days. Then we go to Athens for a couple of days. And then the trip was so tiring they had to make a rest stop in Rome.
Oh, that's just horrible.
Yeah.
So-
You poor bastard.
Remember I said I wanted to go see the world?
Right on.
But you know, that's how it started. And I got into the 89th, and I'm flying the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. I got to show you a picture of my trainer. Okay.
There you go.
Oh, look at that. That looks like Henry Kissinger.
It
And
is
look at his
indeed, huh?
signature. Can you see his signature?
Move it up just
At
a
the
little
very
bit.
bottom. Yeah. There we
There
go.
it
Oh, yeah.
is.
There we go. Oh, look at that. Okay.
Is that beautiful?
Yes.
There's
So
a.
I'm honored with that because there's not many people in the whole world that that he would sign it and write it out. Usually a calligrapher writes it. That picture. That was us in Damascus
Okay.
doing a peace agreement with Syria. But
Okay. So Kissinger at the bottom of the stairs and all the various
yeah, I'm
State
at the
Department
top.
folks.
I'm at the top up there. I was still a staff
Okay.
sergeant in the Air Force. But anyway, that
Okay.
was our crew. Yeah, he was the trainer. If you could work for Dr. Kissinger, you work for anybody. He was tough. He led through warlord management. That means fear and intimidation.
Was he in the Marines?
Well, he was an Army corporal, I understand.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And but I figured out coming from Long Island and the area I grew up in, Bayport, Long Island, Sayville, I entered the service in '65 with no prejudices, no biases. I never grew up with anything like that. And I didn't realize till later on that was a big advantage to me in the service, because there was a lot of that other stuff going around. Kissinger paid me the greatest compliment I ever had in my life. He looked at me and he said, "You treat me better than an old Jewish mother."
That's great.
We would that trip to Damascus, 34 days. We were supposed to do a 15-day trip and end up 34 days, and going back and forth from Tel Aviv to Damascus and back and to Cairo and back and forth. And he had Secret Service detail, because there were so many people that wanted to pop him. So we were coming back from Damascus and we're on the ramp. He didn't trust any embassies. Any transmission of information went back and forth to the White House, to President Nixon or other people, all came from our airplane. There goes my light.
Yeah, you got to move around a little bit.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah, we can see you. It's all right.
Can you still see it?
Yeah, we can still see it. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So anyway, we came back from Damascus, and I'm on the ramp with him. He carried all his briefcases with all his information, and as I said, all the traffic went through our airplane. And he turned to the Secret Service agent and said to him, while I was standing there, "Sir, I'm really concerned about all these death threats. I mean, it's really serious." And he gets to hear about them. And he said, "I'm really concerned. What do you think's going on?" And the agent turned to him and said, "Don't worry, sir. We'll never let them take you alive." Which is a good deal.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, he was my trainer, and I'm not the only one that I consider my trainer. Listen to the people that was on his staff during that period of time, shuttle diplomacy. Al Haig was a full colonel on his staff. Okay. There was a gentleman named Winston Lord. He became the second ambassador to Red China after Bush. Sandy Berger was on the staff. Rob Gates was on the staff. Lawrence Eagleberger was on his staff. Yeah. He was a GS like 11 or something like that. He became Secretary of State. The guy was a trainer. I mean, the people that worked for him had great respect for him. Now, we'll be political, guys, about one thing, and it's because of Kissinger. At the end of his term, 1976, when he left office, his personal statement was about the Middle East. He said, "Until the Arab nations evolve," and a lot of people don't even know what that means. I don't want to get into that. He said, "Until they evolve, you give all the Arab nations the same amount of bullets, and you give Israel more bullets than everybody else, and you stay out of their civil wars."
Okay.
How'd he do?
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
he stayed on through Ford, right? He was Ford's Secretary of State as well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he was, but he was the guy that trained us. If you could work for Henry, you would work for anybody. He was, and as long as you didn't bullshit him. If he said, if you did something, he'd say, "Who did that?" "I did it." "Well, don't do it again." "Okay, no problem." But you start giving him bullshit, you're gone.
Okay. Well, fair enough, right? I mean, that's nothing wrong with that approach in that sense. So I guess here's a question I wanted to ask, maybe more towards the end, but I'll ask it here, and then we'll get to it if it's not. Who was the most difficult person to work for? Was it Kissinger?
Yes.
Okay.
However, if you knew and you understood, find out what somebody said, "How do you get to work for 5 presidents?" And, Dr. Kissinger, what you do, you find out what they want you to do, and you do it with a good attitude.
Well, there's a concept nobody seems to know about anymore.
Weird.
Do what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a secret sauce at all.
Right? Yeah. And yet it seems to be. Too funny. Okay. So how did you wind up transitioning to Air Force One and presidential service?
Well, I was in the outfit. I was flying the big birds, and we would fly all the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defenses. Now, in the Congress, one of my moments I remember, there was a gentleman named Mindle Rivers. He was a congressman from Charleston, South Carolina, very proud, powerful gentleman, head of the Armed Service Committee. And one day, I've been around the world with him, and one day he came in the back and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Son," he's a Southern gentleman. "Where about you from anyway?" And I said, "Well, sir, I'm from Long Island." And he said with some disdain in his voice, "Long Island?" I said, "Yes, sir, but I'm from the South Shore of Long Island."
There you go.
So one time we're going to Brussels, and I'm still a young staff sergeant on the airplane, and he was leaving the airplane. I said, "Sir, I know you quit drinking, but I put a bottle of Jack Daniels in your bag in case you have guests in your room." He said, "Son, you're going to go far someday."
Fantastic. Oh man. So
anyway, when I'm flying the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, I get back to a story. There was at Talisman Yacht Club, this is 1960s. We had form-fitted sheets on the bed. Nobody else had that. Striped form-fitted sheets. We had a masseuse. We had our own seaplane service from Manhattan going back and forth to Fire Island. There was all these big wheel super guests. One of them was a lady named Happy. And the area, I mean, it's a very risque joint. Okay. They're a lot of money. They all dress like they were living in the French Riviera. I have never seen a woman that wasn't showing some lace underwear somewhere. Okay. And they do some pretty risque stuff. I mean, my friend Timmy alerted me and said, Howie, you got to get up there all jumping in the pool naked, and they're drinking martinis out of beer pitchers and stuff like that. Well, one of the guests was named Happy. 10 years later, I'm working for Nelson Rockefeller on Air Force 2, and guess who the first lady is? Happy Rockefeller.
No.
Same lady.
No.
Now, when she saw me, I can remember this today, she gasped. I mean, I've seen her naked. Don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, and here I'm the steward, and she went, "Howie?" And I said, "Rose Mateus." They used to everybody drank Rose Mateus wine back then.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, you remember?" And they kind of neutralized it, but everything went okay. But that was a shocking experience for me and for her.
Oh, yeah, right.
It was one of those small world, just a small world,
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And in 1976, I was flying with Dr. Kissinger in South America, and a phone call came in from the chief on Air Force One. And he said, "When you get back off the trip, Howie, I want to talk to you." Well, that was a phone call a lot of people were waiting for, and I was the one that got the phone call. One of the things I knew, I was told, I had some mentors along the way. If you wanted to go to Air Force One, and it was not necessarily my high priority, I just wanted to enjoy myself more than anything else. Don't tell anybody. As soon as you tell somebody you're going to Air Force One, you're going to have people working against you. I never said it, never indicated that.
Yeah.
And so I got back off the trip with Kissinger, and I went in, and Boyd was still president at the time. It was getting close to the campaign. And Charlie Palmer, which is the best boss I ever worked for in my life, he sat me down. He said, "We'd like to hire you." And I was a flight examiner, and they didn't have a flight examiner on the crew. And he had heard good things about me. So being a flight examiner didn't hurt. And anyway, he said, "We'd like to hire you, but however, you realize that the campaign's close, and historically they used to change crews, so we can't guarantee you a job. You know, the thing is that you need to work for the White House for a year to get the airport, the presidential service badge."
Okay.
Yeah.
He said, "So you may not even get the service badge. If you're willing to take that risk, we'd like to hire you." And I said I would. And one of the things I thought was kind of neat, I knew President Ford as a vice president. I knew him as a congressman and as a gentleman, believe me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the myths, I had mentioned this, that he was a klutz. I mean, that was really the myth of the world. This picture you're seeing now, that was my 30th birthday, and he was congratulating me. the man was the best athlete of president we ever had. We were in Salzburg, Austria, and he tripped when he went down the stairs. But if you look at the tape, he rolled like a football player. The guy is a black diamond skier. You can't be a klutz and be a black diamond skier.
Right.
I mean, out in Colorado, we're talking about. So, he was and a really nice person. So in 1976, I got offered the job on Air Force One, and he was president. And when he saw me, he was kind of delighted because he knew me. And he said, Howie. I said, yes, sir. He said, you got to Air Force Two first, but I got here first. Don't forget it.
There you go. Fantastic. So what do you think led to the fact that, obviously President Carter beat him in the 76 election. Why do you think you weren't let go and they didn't clean house and send everybody away?
There was a souped-up Marine, E9, that was down in the White House. I don't want to mention any names. That was more powerful than anybody else.
So it's a Marine Sergeant Major.
Yes, but he was now a civilian, and he was higher ranking than all the generals.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I will mention his name because he passed away. His name Bill Gully.
Okay.
And he ran airlift operations and sharp guy. As I said, he was the most powerful guy I knew in the White House. So I got a training mission to go to Georgia, and he's the passenger. And this is to go down and talk to President Carter. And we had Colonel McClellan and another pilot that was flying the Jetstar. And the menu was we had scrambled eggs and French toast with peanut butter and red eye gravy with a ham and grits and things of that nature. It's all kind of a joke that we're going south. And he went down there and talked to President Carter and said, you need to keep the crew for continuity. And, President Carter is a Navy officer, and this gentleman, E9s have a pretty good reputation if they're good.
Sure.
And he's the one who recommended the crew to stay, and we stayed.
Fantastic.
A Marine, how's that? Huh?
Yeah, right.
How about that? Geez, a Marine, a senior Marine NCO, that's a good leader. That's kind of weird, isn't it, Repeat? Hey, I have a quick question for you, Howie. It's kind of a technical question, and before we get too far down the line, you said you were a flight examiner. I think I know what that means, but could you expand on that?
Well, I was everybody in the steward career field, anywhere in the Air Force and probably anywhere else. I mean, you have to get a check ride, just like the pilots.
Yes.
And we issued a closed book exam, an open book exam, and then sent them out on a mission. And I was there to observe how the performance was and things of that nature. I was the youngest flight examiner ever in the history of the 89th at that time.
That's pretty awesome. Okay, thank you. I was pretty sure I knew what that was. I just wanted to make sure we had it out there for our listeners. Thank you, sir.
Wait a minute. You're there for their safety, not to serve them food? What are the odds?
Well, a little bit of everything.
Well, technically, I'm assuming your occupational specialty was air crewman, right? It was technically an air crewman.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, the mission of Air Force One is to provide secure and safe air transportation for the president. The second priority is to try to provide all the services that the White House would provide for the president as he traveled throughout the world. So the Air Force One becomes a flying White House.
Sure.
And my job as the flight attendant and the chief flight attendant on the aircraft was to provide a professional but comfortable atmosphere. And I was responsible for all the services on the airplane. That's for the crew, for the president, for the senior staff, for the president's family, for the Secret Service, for the press. My goal on the airplane was the last person in the last seat. I wanted the same service as the president.
Sure.
Okay.
We looked at the airplane and we would tell our people, somebody's going to this mission we got. Somebody's going to get on Air Force One for the first time. We want to give them a memorable, actually a good experience, something they can recall. I had great people. I got dinged a little bit from some of the higher echelons because I didn't hire all 10s. Uh,
Oh,
you-
he-
can you imagine having 18 tens working for you?
Oh,
yeah.
that'd be
Okay.
tough.
Well, yeah, but everybody individually liked these tens and things of that nature. I was looking for people that could play and work well with each other,
Yeah.
that could do the job. Because
There
we're
you
going to be
go.
on that airplane for a long period of time, and I need people that can do it. And I really had
close quarters here. Yeah.
close quarters, men and women, and they were fantastic. But I gave them all profile exams. I mean, I knew where they should be with, who they should work with, who they shouldn't work with. And I'll give you an example. One mission we had with President Bush, we took off at 7 a.m. That means I got up at 3. I'd rather take off at 6 at night because I got a good night's sleep.
Right.
Okay. So we take off, take off at 7, go to Daytona Beach, sit on the ground for 3.5 hours. Take off from there, go to Charlotte, North Carolina, sit on the ground for 2.5 hours. Took off from there, went to Andrews Air Force Base, sat on the ground for 3.5 hours. Took off from there, went to Warsaw, Poland.
Whoa. All in a day.
Wait a minute, we're not done yet. We sat on the ground for 5 hours and then flew to Munich, Germany.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I kind of lost track of how long a day this was all of a sudden.
It sounds like we're up to about 36 hours in this day. But
Right, 36, 38 hours. And when we got there, after the mission was over, I had a debriefing with my people, and I said, "You guys don't know how good you are." I said, you got off that airplane after 30 some hours and you're still generally nice to each other. Okay. That's a big deal because I'll give you an example. I'm going to put you and a person that you're madly in love with at your peak of romanticism, put you in the Lincoln Continental and let you drive from Andrews to Disney World, which is 16 hours. When you get out of the car and you're at the peak of romanticism, when you get out of the car in Orlando, you better be very careful how you talk to each other.
right.
And I said, and you guys are better than that. And you're not romantically inclined here. So,
Right. Oh, fantastic. Well, and I realize Secret Service handles security, but what was security like? And did it change much over the term of your 5 presidents with whom you worked? Or was it, because obviously you guys are crew, but are you still being screened like crazy, or was it, or were you a known entity at that point? They'd done your background checks and trusted you.
Well,
I would imagine there has to be a lot of trust.
yeah, there is. But at the same time, we had what they called then, I don't know what they call it now with the woke stuff. It was referred to as a Yankee white clearance.
Okay.
I mean, I had access to whatever the president saw.
Yeah.
That's pretty high level.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
To stories you could tell, but won't.
and security was always one of the things in my job, as far as giving I was the hotel manager of the airplane and responsible for all the services. And if there's a party or a celebration or the meals or whatever, but my main responsibility was to make sure that everything that was consumed on that airplane wasn't tampered with.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And, okay, the food and the drinks. How about the chewing gum and the toothpaste and the mouthwash and the candy? And that was my total big responsibility. So, but security got, they don't help you get your job done sometimes because their security is important. And I agree with that. I understand after 9/11, it got even worse. So,
I can only imagine.
Can I ask a logistics question, Howie?
Sure.
Was the food prepared off-site and catered onto the plane, or was the food actually prepared on the plane?
Okay, I'm going to get a little bit of jog on it. That when I was at Talisman Yacht Club, the chef and I on Friday night he'd plan a meal, and there was a lot of European people, so we had a lot of European food. And it would Friday night dinner, a Saturday breakfast, Saturday lunch, Saturday dinner, Sunday breakfast, Sunday lunch, and then he'd make a menu. After he identified the meals, then he'd make a menu, then he'd make a shopping list, and then we go to a grocery store and go shopping. And I'm 16 and I'm realized I got to put all the frozen stuff together, refrigerated stuff, the dry stuff. Then I got to go to the liquor store. I'm thinking I'm just doing the work, and I got to buy gin, and I got to buy vodka, and I got to buy all the complements, the lemons and the limes and the olives and the onions and all this other stuff. And that was just my job. On Air Force One, I get an itinerary. And where we're going, and I look at it, and I identify how many lunches, how many breakfasts, how many dinners, And all my stewards were trained to work in all positions. They rotated around. At one time on Air Force One, there was aisle people and galley people. And I didn't like that concept because the people in the galley forget what it's like to be in the aisle. People and I forget what it's be. And we went to Culinary Institute of America, did a training mission for us to fulfill prepare food on Air Force One. So here on my Air Force One, guess what I do? I identify the meals, and then I go into my chefs. I pick 3 people for each galley, and I would let them. I give them how many breakfasts, how many lunches, how many dinners, how many birthday parties, whatever it is. Give it to them, and they design the meals. Now I could design the meal. Guess what? When they do it, they're going to make damn sure it's done right because their name's on it. So, and then they go shopping. So what I was doing when I was 16 is the same job I was doing in the air.
Oh, that's
fair enough. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
But also now, and everything's prepared on the airplane. Some stuff's pre-prepared in the kitchen. And on Air Force One, when we had a 707, we had very limited refrigeration, extremely limited. If we had anything, and you know, they don't want me to go shopping in Beijing or Cairo. You know, when I flew with Kissinger, the embassies hated me. When I walked in the door, they'd scream because they were delivered all these goods and I was going to take them to put on the airplane. But, you know, we shop for everything and everything's homemade and done on the airplane and nothing's catered. If I did cater a barbecue meal from someplace in the United States, we used to go to Houston and Otto's. And we would be in civilian clothes. They never knew who we were. And we'd get barbecue. And maybe afterwards I'd get them a picture signed by the pilot that they could hang up in the restaurant. But that would only be after we picked up the food.
Okay. Hey, and that kind of segues into another question I wanted to ask you. When you were on Air Force One and it was a mission status, were you guys, the air crew, wearing uniforms or was it civilian attire?
It depends. If the airplane's going overseas to an area where they don't want to identify a military, the flight crew would wear civilian clothes. Our flight attendants always wore civilian clothes. I mean, and I read the book Dress for Success, and I worked real hard on that. And my pilot, Danny Barr, who's a great leader, he said, "Damn, Franklin," he says, "your stewards are looking better than the president."
Well, I'm going to throw up this picture.
Well, that was the squadron.
Oh, okay.
That was a squadron. That was McDonald's. That was his congressman.
Okay, so you're on an airplane, but yeah, he's got a paper McDonald's hat on and a tray with the burger and the Coke.
that was show business, you know.
Sure, right? Yeah.
We're probably in the Middle East coming out of Cairo, and we showed them McDonald's. They loved it, you know. But our own meat and our own potatoes and stuff like that.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a big challenge in every respect.
I can only imagine just the security on the food alone.
Let me also bring it to your attention. Everybody pays for their meals on Air Force One. I bill everybody. It goes to the White House. I mean, I billed Hillary. I billed Bill. I billed Chelsea. I billed the staff. I billed George Stephanopoulos. Everybody got a bill. And in other words, if I shopped, the 747, we'd shop for 100 people, including crew. And if you didn't eat, I wouldn't charge you. Okay. But whatever it cost me for the meal, that's what I would divide it by the number of people. And that's what we would charge.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. The Air Force should be paying for that. The
press, what I understand, the press paid a coach fare plus $1 to fly on the airplane. But then they also had to pay what they consumed.
Okay.
They got a bill for their meals.
So there's no free meal on Air Force One. That's what I'm hearing.
No free lunch. Yeah.
There was during the Nixon administration, and then when he got in trouble, they started charging. So the taxpayers were paying for it up until that point.
Oh, okay. Hey,
all those passengers are on per diem. Why should they get a free meal?
Right. Yeah. So why should they? They're getting paid already to
be there
to pay for meals. So
right.
that's a valid point.
Yeah.
Would you have a question? Repeat, because if you don't,
I do. I'm curious. You talk about the press and all that. Well, Tom Brokaw isn't sitting up there with President Carter in first class, as it were. Can you describe, without giving away the secrets of it, how Air Force One is divided up. And obviously, we'll talk about this too. You went from the 707 to the 747 during your tenure. So can you talk about how it's divided up without giving away national secrets?
Yeah, well, the 707 was a neat airplane, and we really enjoyed it, but set up to fly the president. So the front of the airplane, when you walked in, you go to the right, and there's a radio operator. There's a big radio operator area, and that really impressed everybody. There's a whole bunch of lights and a whole bunch of stuff.
I can
They
only
were very
imagine the
powerful
electronics.
just because, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
And then you go into the stateroom for the president, and then the next thing there would be a stateroom for the first lady. Then you go into a conference area, conference room area. Then there's a working staff area. Then there's a guest area, and these all shared by bulkheads, that separated things. And then there's Secret Service area. Then there's a press area in the back.
Okay.
So, and Tom Brokaw, I know him when he's a young guy, and he was a real nice guy. I got along with the press extremely well. Most of the crew didn't like the press, and I think it's all because of where I grew up and my experience. I didn't hold anything against whatever they did. Before I forget, I'll tell you a little story. You remember Sam Donaldson?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he was a pretty big ego, and he loved to show off and things of that nature. And so he was on the airplane. At one time, he was a White House correspondent, and then he ended up being an anchor later on. And Marlon Fitzwater, he was on with us on one trip, and after he's an anchor, and Marlon Fitzwater said to me, "Hey, Howie, Sam Donaldson's with us, and he's now making $1 million a year." I said, "No kidding." I said, "I remember when he's making $250,000 a year." He said, "Yeah." He said, "You need to go back and spill coffee on him and say, 'Oops, you spilled coffee on $1 million man.'" So I said, "Okay." And I go back, and Helen Thomas is sitting there at the table, and Sam's sitting in the corner, and two other representatives, press people are sitting there. And they were all drinking coffee out of this little plastic coffee cup with the presidential seal on it. And they all kind of enjoyed that. And they were drinking coffee, and I shoved the table in front of the press, and I said, "Oops, I almost spilled coffee on $1 million man." Now, I want you to know, Sam is beaming because I told him. I said, "Sam," I said, "I remember when you're making $250 a year." He says, "Yeah." I said, "I remember when you're making $500,000 a year." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "I remember when we landed in California with Reagan, that a helicopter came to pick up Ronald Reagan, and a helicopter came to pick up Sam Donaldson." I got him. He's beaming, okay. And I said, "And now you're making $1 million a year," and he's gleaming. And I said, "Yeah, but I understand Willard Scott's making $2 million." And he says, "Oh, that GD weatherman." So we had humor on Air Force One as well.
Right, there you go. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, so that leads to the natural question, and then we'll come back to, I want to try to get this in a semi-timeline. What is the funniest thing you ever saw? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I never pre-asked that question. In all your years on Air Force One, what's the funniest thing that you saw?
Okay, this is when Reagan took office. President Sadat over in Egypt was assassinated.
Right.
And it was early in his Reagan administration, and he sent a delegation to the funeral. Mm-hmm. And it was on 26000. That's the airplane that's in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in a museum right now. It was the aircraft that President Johnson was sworn in on. President Kennedy's body was Scott. And we carried Senator Dirksen. We carried Mamie Eisenhower. It's got all the history behind it. Remember, It's set up to fly the president.
Right.
Okay. Well, the delegation going over there, the aircraft was not set up for it, believe me. So the ranking person was Al Haig. He's the Secretary of State. He's in the presidential stateroom. Caspar Weinberger is the second ranking person. And SecDef, and he is in the conference room. Now, remember, the working staff area is in the back. In the working staff area, I have President Carter, Mrs. Carter, President Ford, Henry Kissinger.
So you got former presidents relegated to the back.
Richard Nixon is sitting in Mr. Ehrlichman's seat.
Wow.
I mean, is this a great country or what?
Yeah.
Henry sees me and he grabs my jacket. He said, "Howie, you did it." I said, "What?" He said, "You got me in sturge." Okay,
You
so
got me
anyway,
in steerage. Fantastic.
we're going across the pond, okay? And sooner or later, you got to go to the bathroom. And I had just worked for President Carter as my commander-in-chief at President for 4 years. And the gentleman walks forward, comes up front, and looks at me and graciously said, "Howie, can I use your bathroom?" Can you imagine?
That's pretty awesome.
I'm the NCO. I was not a chief at the time. I think I was an E7. Asked me if he could use the bathroom. And immediately I understood why, because his bathroom location would be in the back of the airplane. He's got to walk past Helen Thomas and the press, and he don't want to do that. So immediately I understood why he's there.
Yeah.
Of course, and I escorted up to the crew bathroom, was right outside the cockpit. And he goes in the bathroom. And I'm thinking, this is a hell of a moment, you know. Next thing you know, here comes President Ford. I'm going, holy shit. President Ford graciously comes up and asks me if I could use the bathroom. I said, it's being occupied, but I didn't say who was occupying the bathroom. I said, it's being occupied right now. So now the we're standing there near the radio operator. The radio operator is Jerry Rankin. He was with Ford as vice president, and he knows him. And we're having a little chit chat between President Ford, the radio operator, and myself, friendly talk, waiting for the President Carter to come out of the bathroom. And here comes Henry Kissinger.
Oh boy.
In my mind, I'm sitting there. I got Henry Kissinger standing on the line. I got President Ford standing on the line, and President Carter's using my bathroom.
This truly sounds like the setup to a joke.
Yeah, it does.
Really
So,
does.
yeah.
Well, it's the reality of it is. Anyway, Henry don't ask. See, he walks right up to the bathroom, sees it's occupied, and comes back. And he knows Jerry Rankin. He was the radio operator when we were Secretary of State traveling, and he knew all the transmissions and the communications that he was putting forth. And Henry looks at us and he said, "You know, I got to go back and tell Cappy that the discipline in the military is slipping." And I said, "Why is that, sir?" He said, "Because you guys all used to be scared to death of me, and you're not anymore." And then he says, "Who the hell's in the bathroom?" I said, "It's President Carter, and he took a book with him." And Henry says, "Yank his ass out of there." I said, "No, sir, we can't do that." Now, remember, I'm an NCO. Can you imagine the people I got standing in line?
Oh yeah, you got presidents.
And Al Haig used to work for all these people. And he's in the stateroom with his own bathroom. What a country.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Next thing you know, guess what? Here comes Richard Nixon.
Well,
Now, Richard was more of a private gentleman. He came up, he surveyed the situation. He
Yes.
saw what was going on. He turned to John Palmer, who was one of his stewards when he was president. He turned to John and said, "When it's my turn, call me."
stand in line for me.
Is that a moment of history of?
Well, you know, it's like a truly setup to a joke, and it's the best part is it's real
It
life.
happened.
Yeah.
Only a few people on Earth know about this.
That's
Now
true.
a lot of people do, but
Now
that
a lot
is
of
very
people
unique.
will. That's
Well, let me give you one other one on that airplane. We took Deng Xiaoping. I don't know if I pronounced it right. The premier of China before the one that's in charge now.
Mhm.
And you know what we do in the United States, we bring them over and show them everything we got to show them what we can do. And so we were again on 6,000, and I was not working the stateroom. I had a young gentleman, Kevin, that was working the stateroom for me, and I went into the stateroom, and there's a stateroom, and then there's a bathroom forward of the stateroom, private in that stateroom area. And there's a sink, and there's a stool that pulls out under the sink. And then the toilet looks like a little love seat. It's got cushions over it. You know, it doesn't look like a toilet.
Yeah.
It just looks like a couch.
Oh,
Okay.
I know where this is going.
I walk in there, and one of his aides, Deng Xiaoping, is picking him up, and he's peeing in the sink.
Can't find the toilet.
Well, yeah, and immediately I also immediately realized the guy that's taking care of him didn't realize that he should show him where the toilet is.
Yeah.
Just took
Oh
that
my
for
God.
granted. And I'm saying this gentleman's, he's a smart gentleman. He's thinking, you know, they got a pretty nice airplane here, but what damn, they don't have any toilets. So
That
now
is
I
a
had to go out
scream.
of my way to apologize for our stupidity because I don't want him to lose face. And when I show
Yeah,
him this is where
yeah.
the toilet is,
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
boy.
we're all
Oh,
real
boy.
people. We're all real people.
That's right.
That's funny.
I got
at
a
least you
vision
didn't
of
pee
that.
on the couch, or. Oh man, that's hilarious. Well, there's so Jeff Moss is in the live stream audience, and he reminded me that I should ask this. So I'm going to ask this question, and after that, we'll say a quick thank you to HSI Wealth Strategies for sponsoring. But he would like you, and I would like you, please, to describe how it is that the Reagan Library managed to get a hold of a 707 as the 74 came in.
Yeah, well, the Reagan, he ordered the airplane, the 74, the first part of his second term.
Right.
And I was lucky enough, and thank God, I was standing next to him when he was discussing this. He said, if I knew I was going to win with such a landslide, I should have ordered it the first term.
Right.
And I was here working as the airport director, and it was July. And it was late in the afternoon. It gets hot down here in North Carolina once in a while. And
yeah, so you I'm sorry to interrupt. So you're working at the Cape Fear Regional Jetport down there in North Carolina now. So
Yes,
you were
sir.
already out when this occurred.
Yeah, and what happened was, at that time I had very few employees. It was me and a couple other people. So I was moving airplanes, refueling airplanes, which I don't mind at all. I mean, that's what I was doing. And it was hot, and the Pentagon called me and said we'd like to ask you and your wife, because she was a crew member also. She was the administrative assistant to President Carter and the pilot, and the administrative assistant to Ronald Reagan and the pilot. We'd like to ask you if you'd accompany the airplane 7000 and take it to California and put it at the Reagan Library. And stupid me, I said, well, listen, I think I really appreciate it. Because I was tired and it was hot, I said, why don't you utilize all the resources in the Washington area before me and my wife drive all the way up there? And I went home and told my wife. She said, you said what?
You dumbass, call him back.
Well, they called me back the next day, and the lady on
Okay.
the phone said, Mr. Franklin, you understand Nancy Reagan expects you and Linda to be there.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we went up, and it was really fantastic. They had the airplane spotted in the number one spot where the president would be, and the crew, we were all in the VIP room, and then we walked out. They had a beautiful goodbye to the airplane. We had the crew chief, the maintenance guys, the flight attendants, the pilots, and we were all on the airplane. The Secretary of the Air Force was on there, some senators and things of that nature. A big event, and we flew to California, and that's how I ended up on the Today Show, because Candace Brown, who I knew, interviewed me on the airplane. She interviewed everybody, and she said, Howie, why did you come all the way from North Carolina to accompany this airplane? I said, I've been to heaven and hell on this airplane.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up on the Today Show. But we flew out in California, and there was really another big event out there. And our crew chief walked up and gave the log books to Nancy Reagan, and we turned the airplane over to her. And that's how it ended up in the Reagan Library.
That's a great story.
Nice. Now, how far is the Reagan Library from the airport? Did they have to take the wings off and truck it in, or how'd they do that?
Yeah, we went to March Air Force Base, and I'm not sure. It's quite a ways.
Okay.
And they had to take the wings off. And it was painted, not the Air Force One colors, because when we got the 747, that airplane went back to the squadron, and it became a squadron airplane with a different mission. I had a speech at the Reagan Library and my son accompanied me out there, and the airplane wasn't set up yet. And I remember walking out in the Reagan Library looking, and there was my airplane laying in the mud.
Oh boy.
With the wings off. If you get the chance to see the Reagan Library, the airplanes popped up, set up. They got the helicopter, Marine helicopter right below it. And underneath that, there's a bar from Ireland, because the Reagan liked that, the Irish. And if you walk out on the ramp to go in the airplane, there's monitors there, and myself and other crew members are pictures in the monitors of the airplane. But the thing is that if you see the airplane, the interior of the airplane is not brought back. We'd like to bring it back to its original. So it's set up to fly senators and congressmen. It's the interior has changed completely from what it was Air Force One.
Okay.
All right. Well, I still want to get to see that someday. I'll make it. So, all right. Well, let's say thank you to Robbie Walling over at HSI Wealth Strategies. And then we got a lot more questions. We've barely scratched the surface of the presidents here. So,
are you having fun?
Yes.
I'm having a ball. Thank you.
Thank you, Howie.
What an honor. Thank you, sir. So there I was, flying high, thinking my retirement was locked in, running smooth, no adjustments needed. Then it hit me. Retirement planning isn't something you can just put on autopilot. You can't just set it and hope for the best. If you're not actively steering, you could be drifting off course without even realizing it. That's why pilots who get it turn to HSI Wealth Strategies. These guys aren't your typical financial advisors. They're pilots. Military, airline, guard, civil. They've sat where you're sitting. They understand the unique financial landscape pilots face, from high earning years to the minefield of taxes and inflation waiting down range. And here's the kicker. On average, they're saving pilots $1 million or more just by making smart course corrections. The earlier you start working with them, the more opportunities they have to reduce your lifetime tax burden and keep more of your hard-earned money where it belongs. But don't worry, even if you're closer to your Centrum Silver years, they have the expertise to help make the most of your approach to retirement. Now, let me ask you something. If your airplane was leaking fuel mid-flight, would you ignore it and hope you still had enough to make it to your destination? Of course not. You'd act immediately. Your retirement is no different. If you're not taking control now, you could be watching your hard-earned money evaporate through unnecessary taxes and inefficient planning. And listen, we all know the classic joke. How does a pilot make $1 million? Well, he starts with $2 million and manages it himself for 6 months. Funny? Yes, but humor has truth to it, and this one is painfully true. So here's your wake-up call. This is your moment right now. You have a choice. You can keep hoping your retirement lands smoothly, or you can take action and get a real strategy from people who know exactly what it takes to make it work for pilots. Call Robbie Walling at 214-538-7030. That's 214-JET-7030. Or email robert.walling@nm.com. That's robert.walling, WALLING, at novembermike.com. Because when it comes to your financial future, you only get one final approach, and there are no go-arounds. HSI Wealth Strategies, pilots guiding pilots to a smooth landing in retirement. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Robbie, for sponsoring this show and bringing these amazing stories. Wow. Like I said, we've barely even scratched the surface. So as long as you can sit with us, we'd be thrilled to have you keep chatting with us.
Sure.
Great. Well, what I'd like to ask, so you were witness to modern history, and I don't even know where to begin. The couple of the big ones come to mind was, well, I guess you obviously weren't on Air Force One yet. Where were you the day Nixon resigned, and what was that like?
Well, I remember when he left, and the airplane 27,000 took him to California.
Okay.
I remember when they departed, and I was out there and saw them depart the area and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But that's basically.
Okay. And then the other big one that I recall, now you were on Air Force One, was the nearly successful assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. Oh, I got to back up. There were two assassination attempts on Ford. Were you on Air Force One by then?
No, it was
Okay.
right after that event happened.
Okay. All right. And then and Reagan actually got hit. What I can only imagine what the mood was like, because regardless of politics, these are the people that you're working around and serving. And I imagine that there's some friendship grows. And that's got to be a tough. What was that like?
Well, my wife, and we weren't married at the time, we were playing racquetball at Andrews. I walked out and somebody told me he got shot. And everybody was really upset about it. And he had a great sense of humor. I want you to know, I tried to catch him for 8 years being phony. I unfairly laid for him. I said, this guy can't be this good. And he was. I mean, he was, whatever you saw on television, he was even more of a leader behind the scenes. I remember we took him to California after he healed, and Secret Service came up to me when we were departing. He said, if I got shot, I wouldn't be working this hard. He was out there cutting brush and riding horses and doing things like that.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, he was. I had a great sense of humor. Early on in that administration, Doug Holstein was one of the Marine One pilots, and he told me a story. He was down here in North Carolina running the aerovacs for some organization down here, and he told me, he said, one of the first trips, the Carter administration are Southern gentlemen, and they dress that way, more casual, not lousy, but positive, casual dress. And the Reagans came in, and the boys are dressed with $300 ties,
Yeah.
And to the crew and to some people, it was a little intimidating going from that laid back to this high-powered. And they were dressed to intimidate, to show power and things of that nature. So it was a little intimidation. And Doug told me the story. He said they took off from the Washington Monument with Marine One, and they're going to Andrews Air Force Base. He looks down, he got a transmission light on. According to what I hear, that means he's got to put it on the ground. So, the first thing you do is you fly the airplane. So he's flying the airplane, but he's making his call.
This is Marine One, the helicopter. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he's flying the helicopter, but he makes his calls. And I ran into a pilot, Marine One pilot, lives here in Wilmington. He was flying the backup Marine helicopter. He said he never taxied a helicopter that fast in his whole life to get in position. And it was over at Bowling Air Force Base. They had a little detachment over there, so that's where they went in. So Doug said, I got all my phone calls made and everything, and I'm still flying the airplane, but I got a few minutes to think. And he said, I'm going to get fired. He said, the two crew chiefs are going to get fired. The chief of maintenance is going to get fired. Those are things that's running through his mind.
Right.
So
you just handed the president a bad bird.
Right.
Yeah.
And remember, add that little intimidations there also. Okay.
Sure.
So anyway, they land, and the Marine opens up the back door, walks around the front, opens the door, out steps the president. President Reagan. Now, remember, he's been a governor. He understands primary backups and all these information. Some people don't. He understands those things. He walks over to the backup helicopter, walks to the back, walks to the front, walks up and kicks the tire.
Getting the pre-flight done.
He turns to the crew and says, looks good to me, boys. Let's go catch an airplane. That's leadership.
Right. Yeah.
And he knew the symbols. Kick the tire. He knew the symbols.
Yeah.
That's why he went to the Marine Corps, and that was natural leadership.
Sure.
Sure.
Who didn't have natural leadership? Well, let me ask it this way. Who grew most in that job? I mean, that's a tough job. And my experience in my life, just real quickly, is look at all the presidents as they take office and the day they leave office, and they've all aged, over 8 years. They've aged 20 years or more. I mean, it's a hard looking job. Who grew most into it and became most comfortable in it?
Well, I think they all, they were all on a learning curve. Every one of them. You couldn't say one that isn't, or things of that nature.
Okay.
And when they come to realize what their responsibilities are, the true responsibilities, tell people and tell them what their responsibilities are. I mean, that'll make you sit down and think anyway.
Sure.
They all, and when we get to a person at that level where we put them up for president, they go through quite a few things, and they're pretty qualified.
Sure.
So.
Well, I think the one thing that I've heard about every president and people that have been near them is the one talent they all seem to have is when they're talking with you, you're the only person in the world that matters. that's a gift they all seem to have. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say so. But they all read, what is it, that book?
How to Win
Make
Friends
and Influence Enemies and things of that nature. I think they all read that book. An example of that, 2 years after the Reagan had left office, and we were out in California with George H. Bush, and his secretary called up and said to Kim, our administrative assistant, the president would like to see the crew. And this is 2 years after Reagan left office.
Oh,
yeah. And there was some people, we had 17 of us. We were on a 747 at the time, but we had 17 of us we could get together. And we went to the Reagan office in LA. And I talked to the people who hadn't been there. I said, look, when you meet a president, the normal thing that happens is there's going to be a photographer there. He's going to have some presents wrapped up, and you're going to meet him, shake his hand, take a picture, and he's going to give you a present. That's usually what you get to see, and usually what would happen. So we go into his office, and there he is standing on the outside of his unique office. And the first person comes up, there's a photographer who we knew the photographer, and Secret Service, we knew them. And he took right away, smiled, took a picture. And when he got done, he gave him the present. And he said, go ahead and stand in my office. So he had 17 of us file into his office after he took the picture. We spent 45 minutes with this gentleman in the office. And it was really, this was 2 years after he left office, and he was sharp as a tack. We didn't notice anything.
Sure.
Mikey Wyman is the guy, he could act like the president. I asked Mikey to do his skit and acted like President Reagan. Reagan said, I don't get it, but he did. Anyway,
I don't get it.
There was a colonel on the crew that had never met Reagan, was not on the crew when he was president. And when we walked out of there, he walked up to me and he was so excited. He said, that was the most magnificent thing I ever experienced in my life. He went on and on. I said, why? Why do you feel that way? He said, the man was excited about meeting me.
right.
Okay. Yeah, that's
funny.
That's talent.
Yeah. Wow, who's that good-looking guy?
Yeah, right. We got a picture up with you with President Reagan as
That's
a chief
Oval
master
Office.
sergeant. Look at all them stripes. Holy shit.
Well, now they even increased them. There's 3 on the top now. So
Okay.
when you see a chief walking down the street, well, according to what I've been told, only 1% of the total armed forces can hold that rank.
I believe it. You know, it's got to be like a pyramid. Not everybody can achieve that rank. And man, those are the guys that run the show.
Well, you can make 1% of total armed forces that can hold that rank. It's you can make brigadier general easier.
Oh yeah,
than you make E9.
I believe that.
Howie, I have a question that's burning in the back of my mind. I got to get this out. Are you ready?
Sure.
So you obviously stayed on Air Force One for multiple administrations, and you earlier in your interview here, you alluded to the fact that when you got hired on, the risk was, well, a lot of times, new administration changes the crew on Air Force One. So how is it that you got to stay over and over and over? Is it just because you're that damn good? Because I kind of think that's probably why.
Well, the whole crew, we were unique in the Air Force, and there were some people in the Air Force didn't like that. I had Air Force One pilots that had balls bigger than you could imagine. And we ran our own show, and we had a carrot and a stick to a certain extent. If you got hired on Air Force One, we expected you to give 100% with 100% attitude. And even if you got fired, we're going to get you a good job, because you're setting yourself up for a tragedy if you mess up. So even if you're willing to take that risk, we're going to still try to get you a good job. Okay. So, it worked out really well, because I had a carrot and stick with me. You give us 100% with 100% attitude. I can help get you promoted. We can, do this and do that. And, for continuity, I really believe it's valuable, and they may have lost some of that. Continuity. Imagine you're changing presidents, you're changing staff, and now you're changing crew.
Yeah, it sounds like
it was
recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it was to the Air Force and the United States advantage to keep continuity around. Now, I don't know why, but when I was there and I left in '94, and it lasted a couple more years after that, a couple of administrations. But right now on Air Force One, we had 38 people doing the job. That's crew, radio operators, pilots, co-pilots, flight engineers, office staff, and flight attendants. They now have 385 people, so they tell me.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
So that continuity is gone. And the motivation is gone because it's like a regular Air Force operation. They do 4 years and they're gone, So, and what I heard, some of the people can't wait to leave. We never had stuff like that. I've heard pilots say they couldn't wait to leave. We never had that type of thought process.
Wow. Okay, so obviously times have changed.
Yes.
Oh man. Well, I guess so. You said all of them, but I'm going to go back to this question again. I'm sorry. I'm going to press you on it. Who grew most in the job? Who became much better at it than in the end than in the beginning?
I think President Clinton did.
Okay.
I think
Why?
he did. Well, Well, he had a lot of attributes that we back there. You guys were in the service when they brought up TQM, total quality management.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it works, and he was one that believed in that and stuff like that. He, when my opinion is when they came into office, that group there was a considerable feeling that they looked at professional military people. Were people that couldn't get jobs on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And there was kind of an attitude toward that. But in a year and a half, I saw that change because the military was the only people that would absolutely did what they said they were going to do when they said they were going to do it. Now you realize that the Navy runs the White House. The Marines run the helicopter. The Army and the Coast Guard runs the ground transportation and communications. And the Air Force runs the airplane. So, I mean, I saw them grow and really appreciate the military and what they did and things of that nature.
That's awesome.
That's a unique perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. And you had, which president would you say you were closest with?
Well, yeah, that's a question. That's which one did you like?
Which kid is your favorite? I get it. I'm sorry, that may be an unfair question.
But it's not political. Okay,
Yeah.
It's not with
Right.
politics. The best administration I experienced because they were the most organized was the Reagan administration. We got a schedule once every 3 months, and that's what you did. All the other administrations, they would send us a schedule once a month, then they'd send it twice a month, then they'd send it once a week, then they'd send it twice a week. And literally, because they were responding to polls and things of this nature and everything was fluid. I remember when the Clinton administration came in, these sharp college girls came out that was going to run these trips for the president. And I explained to them, I showed them the airplane, the facilities, and I explained to them, I said, planning is the most important process in this whole moving of a president. And they turned to me and they said, we got here by being spontaneous and we're not going to change. And they weren't bullshit.
How'd that work out for them?
Yeah, how'd that work for them? Because I'm guessing not well.
Well, I literally had a mole in the White House feeding me information. And
there you go.
Yeah, but they knew that I didn't need to know where we're going. I got to know when we're going. I got to have some times.
Right.
And, to go out and buy meals and plan the meals and do it and get
you can't have rotting food or no food. Those are your.
But now, as far as getting close to, Bill Clinton was 1 year younger than me, and so he's the first president I had that predominantly listened to rock and roll. All the other presidents listened to all kinds of music, predominantly country. But some of them would listen to the stuff. My marriage was a failure. My divorce ain't working out either. So
Right.
Clintons were listening to the Four Tops and the Beach Boys, and when they designed the 747, they weren't familiar with a president that liked music as much as President Clinton. So when he wanted to listen to his rock and roll in his stateroom, the whole airplane had to listen to the same music and at the same volume that he liked, and he liked loud rock and roll, which I do. So I went to the radio operators and we bought him a big box.
Big boom box, huh?
Big boom box, put Air Force One on it, and I presented it to him. I said, now you can listen to your own music. And I said, sir, back in the old days, they would have rewired this airplane for $10 million, and we just gave you this, and you got the same quality. He said, you guys are reinventing government. We love it. So one day I went into the stateroom, and he was playing loud rock and roll. He was Cecilia, You're Breaking My Heart.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was quite loud. And he said, Howie, is this too loud? I said, I've been waiting for a guy like you to come along for a long time. So, well, I think some of the crew, and I would say the stewards more than anything else, we kind of crossed the line with the gentleman. And that was part his fault because we were the only people around, wasn't going to ask him for anything, and
Sure.
He needed that kind of friendship. And we're supposed to maintain a professional relationship, but it got a little bit more than that, where we could joke around. I mean, one time we were going to Florida, and I had Steve Lomanak, who's the chief. He lives down here on the golf course with me, with the rest of our Air Force crew down here in Cape Fear. And I had him enter the stateroom from one side, and I entered the other side, and we were going to Florida. And I looked at his schedule, and he was campaigning and working his butt off the whole time. So he was sitting about 6 to 8 feet from me at his desk, and Steve and I were on the other end of the room. And I whispered loud enough so the president could hear. I said, hey, Steve, do you bring your golf clubs? And the president turns, you guys playing golf? I said, yeah, we're playing golf. He said, you ain't playing golf? He said, I'm be damned. He says, I'm down here raising all this money for these people, and they can't give me 4 hours off to play golf, and you guys are playing golf. He said, where are you playing golf? I said, we're playing at Doral. He says, you guys are playing at Doral? I said, yeah, we're playing there free because we know you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, we're not supposed to have that type of relationship.
Sure.
One time he said to me, Howie, I need a favor. I said, sir, if you knew what we'd be willing to do for you, you'd get nervous. He said, I'm already nervous.
Right. Oh, fantastic. In a pre-chat, you were telling me about him coming back, a trip you took shortly after he came back from his mother's funeral.
Yeah.
Relate that?
Yeah, that's in several books, actually. He was... We were going to Moscow to a summit, and his mother had passed away, and he was very close to his mom. His mom traveled with us quite a bit, and he had come from his mother's funeral 3 days. You know how tiring that could be, and being very close to your mom. And he landed at Andrews Air Force Base at 9:30 at night, and the Gulfstream that he's on, and Timmy Kerwin was the chief on that airplane, my deputy. He was taking care of the president, and they taxied up, and he walked off the airplane at 9:30, comes over, walks up the steps of the 747 Air Force One again. He left there because Air Force One, remember, is any airplane that the president's on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Gulfstream was Air Force One while he was on it, and now he's getting on
747.
Yep.
And he's walking up steps. Ted Koppel's doing Nightline on the airplane. Now, I had a kick out of that because the director of the White House brought me back to meet Ted Koppel. Well, Ted Koppel was one of the newsies that I flew with Kissinger quite some time. And so he introduced me to Ted Koppel and said, Howie's the chief, and he'll try to make everything available to you. And Ted says, I've known Howie for 20 years. Don't worry about it. So anyway, he's now, what I'm saying, it's 9:30 at night. He's under the gun. He's going to work. He's not taking his shoes off and relaxing. Okay. And so he's doing Nightline. I remember I was there. One of the questions that they always tried a little bit of a gotcha once in a while. And they asked him why he didn't speak at his mother's funeral. And he said, I thought it was time for a son to be a son, not a president speaking at a funeral. Anyway, he stayed up late, which he always did. And his staff used to say, let Howie wake him up. He likes Howie. because he was difficult to get up sometimes because he would stay up late.
Yeah. Yep.
So I got Hillary in the stateroom. There's a forward stateroom. 747 has when you walk into the stateroom, then there's a forward stateroom with a desk and 2 chairs and 2 couches that pull out into bunks that they can sleep in. And I don't know if they changed that or not. But anyway, I got Hillary to sleep, and then I got him to sleep about 30 minutes later, and he only got 2.5 hours sleep. Now, remember, he came from a funeral. He's doing nightline. He stays up late. I'm waking him up. From the time I step in that stateroom, I got 2 hours. From the time that airplane's going to block in at Moscow, the door's going to open, and he's got to walk out. I actually should have took 2 hours, but I had an hour and a half because I felt terrible for him not getting the right amount of sleep. Yeah. And you guys know, you get your best sleep during your last couple hours of your sleep cycle. I'm blowing that away. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm waking him up Washington time. So when I went in there and I went over to him and I moved him, his body, touched him, and he kind of moved a little bit and moaned a little bit. And that's why I said under my breath, I said, boy, I hate to do this. Well, he yelled, don't do it. That's a direct order from the President of the United States to a Chief Master Sergeant. Yeah. But I know if they're not ready to go when they're ready to go, who they're going to blame. Yeah. That's when I said, sir, it's time to get your ass out of bed and go to work. So I'm the only one that worked for 5 presidents. I'm probably the only one that told the president to get his ass out of bed. And he was okay. He said, oh, okay, no problem. He was, he's product of the 60s. His language that he understood. Well, in the meanwhile, Hillary just heard Howie tell her husband, the president, get his ass out of bed. She starts laughing. I looked at Hillary. I said, don't you laugh. You're next. Let's go. And while we're talking about that, I can verify that she does carry Tabasco sauce in her purse. It's normal. She does it all the time. She always did. She likes it. So
how about that?
Right. That's been debunked so many times. And then you're like, no, it's true. So many people claim, it's not true. So, but apparently it is. So fantastic. Yeah. Wow. So, boy, we've only touched on a few of them. Yeah. So you talked about why you weren't starstruck when you started getting there. Obviously, growing up around, I almost said to Fig, watch out for falling names. He's dropping them faster than we can catch them. But it's true. You've been around all these amazing people, world figures, so much of your life. What was the thing that gave you the most awe when I would say either when you first got to the job or any point during that job? When did you realize, man, I'm really seeing history up close and personal? Well,
it reinforced what I wanted to do as a kid, is see the world. And seeing the world, there's very few countries that I haven't been in. And a lot of that is because of flying with Henry Kissinger. I love to look at the culture. So when I was with Kissinger into China early on, and something I noticed in China, number one, I know, and this was when they had choo-choo trains and bicycles, okay, compared to nowadays. Right. And I saw the Chinese people, number one, they were workers, and hard workers. Yeah. Number two, they're detailed. They don't mind fixing stuff perfectly. If you look at their art, I mean, I saw sculptures of elephants' tusks that the inside of the tusk was sculptured and the inside of the inside was sculptured. I mean,
they're
detailed.
That's detail. Yeah.
Okay, so they're workers and they're detailed, and they like nice stuff. I mean, the more gaudy or richer it is, the more they like it. That's the ideal capitalist, actually. So, seeing those people and seeing the world was the thing that I truly enjoyed. And that was not my primary goal. So.
Right. Well, people often say, if I could only been a fly on the wall. And so you were. So I've got a 2-part question. One, how long did most of them take to get used to the fact that, we just got to have the meeting and we got to talk openly and frankly and all that, regardless of the fact that the steward is in the room with us, that sort of thing. And what is the most amazing or or behind the scenes, like, oh, holy shit, did I just see that you can talk about? Because I'm certain there's things that you saw that you still can't talk about to this day.
Well, I mean, it was a president and what is the head of a Congress, the speaker of a speaker.
Okay.
I don't want to mention any name.
Okay.
And one of the speaker said to the president, I'm in and out of the room. I'm not standing there listening. I mean, I didn't plan on. The speaker was drinking a martini that I made for him, and the president was drinking a glass of ice water. And speaker, I overheard him say, sir, we have a lot of differences. And he said, however, and I know at the end of the day, we have to do what's great for the country. Personally, I think that's missing.
Yeah.
So that to me was extremely inspirational.
Wow. Very cool. And let me ask this. Am I right? Are there things that you saw you went, oh, that could never get out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. That's why they gave us a Yankee White clearance.
Yeah.
I'll give you just, Air Force One, I don't know how it is now, but when I was there during the whole time, it's kind of like being in a MASH outfit or being in a surgery room. Not everything's politically correct because you're on the high wire and you're on the edge all the time. So there's humor going on and things of that nature. One of the most touching moments and scary moments to me, George H. Bush was president. The president knew, and the staff and the whole crew. I was commuting on when I didn't have a mission on a Monday or a Tuesday, and it was Friday coming in. I'm going to Southport, North Carolina, as fast as I could, and everybody knew that. In fact, the navigator, Colonel Jackson, would bring us over Bald Head Island. That's where you go south. That's where most airplanes break ground to go to Florida. And I'd have the president, and myself and the doctor looking out, and I'm pointing down at Oak Island and Bald Head Island and saying, I'm going to be there someday. Someday I'm going to be right there. You see that beach? And they all knew it. So anyway, I don't know if you remember when the statement came out that the President Bush said he didn't like broccoli.
Right.
Yeah, he said, my mother wanted me to eat broccoli, and I'm now president. I'm not eating broccoli, And the lovely thing about it is Barbara said, I love broccoli and it's great. So they were able to handle that pretty well. Now with every president comes in, we get the stewards to find out, if they're allergic to something or they don't like something, we have a list. And I had to answer to the press, and personally, I had to make a written statement. I said, they want to know if the president told me not to serve them broccoli. And I said, I can neither confirm or deny whether the president said that to me, which he didn't. Okay. So anyway, we're coming into Andrews. It's Friday afternoon, and we're about 45 minutes out. And the doctor comes up to me and says, Howie, was there broccoli in that vegetarian lasagna that you served for lunch? I said, well, yes, sir. He said, the president's allergic to broccoli. Well, I'm supposed to know that. And he immediately, he saw my face. He said, no, I know you didn't know. It's not your fault. We know that, but he's not doing very well.
Oh, shit.
Holy shit. So the next thing you know, the pilot, Danny Barr, calls me upstairs and he said, did the doctor talk to you? And I said, yes, sir. He said, Howie, he said, Chief, you're covered. I said, that's not helping me, Eddie.
No.
The president's sick because if he's eating broccoli, and I served it to him. I said, sir, he ate 2 portions of the lasagna.
Right.
So anyway, I go downstairs later on. We're maybe 20 minutes out, and the doctor's getting a shot out to give the president a shot of Demerol or something like that. I'm going, my blood pressure's going off the ceiling,
Yeah.
They knew it. I'm going to go in and see the president. So I walk into his room, and he saw me kind of hang his head down. I said, sir. He said, Howie, it's not your fault. I said, yeah, but sir, he said, I'm not doing very well, but it's not your fault. We know that. I said, oh, shit.
Right.
So anyway, we land, and we clean up the airplane and look up. 2 Secret Service gentlemen are holding the president up as he's walking down the aisle.
Oh, boy.
Huh? So, can you imagine all the things that's going through my mind and my body? We clean the airplane up. I jump in my little Toyota and I'm getting ready to go to Southport, which everybody knew. And I get through at the golf course at Andrews, and my pager goes off and my cell phone goes off, and my deputy says the pilot needs to see you in the pilot's office immediately.
Oh boy.
Right. Thank you. So anyway, I turn around and I go, because I was the chief, I had parking right up next to the pilot's office. If you weren't, you had to park way outside and go through 2 gates and security, and I was able to get right through. I come into the pilot's office, the whole crew, the backup crew and the primary crew is all in his office. And my blood pressure's maxed out. I mean, I'm tingling. Yeah. And I look over at Colonel Jackson. He was the navigator, and he knew that I was upset, and he gave me the thumbs up. I said, "You guys are screwing with me. That's a sign of affection." And the president was in on it.
Oh my God!
Fantastic.
Can you imagine? But they had me. But they literally got a little upset because I didn't. Are you sitting me? I'm going to get mad because you're screwing with me, and he's okay. I love it. Make my day.
Oh, that's great.
Oh man.
Well, that was well played.
Yeah, very well done. Oh man. Well, and it's good to see again humor and having fun with each other and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a MASH or a operating room. It's not all politically correct at one time. So
yeah,
it's on the edge stuff. I mean, I'm sure you fighter pilots do that too.
Nope, not at all.
No, never. We're very serious. No smoking and joking. No messing around.
Straight business, Howie. That's how we operate. No,
that's our bullshit story, and we're stuck with it. Oh man!
I'll give you one with the Carter administration, and it was funny. When I talked to Jeff Morse, he was like an instructor pilot here and things, and he told me that he knew the Carters, and he asked me some things. And I said, one of the things I told him, I said, well, President Carter, he didn't want any alcohol in the airplane, or we had alcohol in the airplane, but he didn't drink and things of that nature in the White House. I had a mission with his mother, Miss Lillian, and she was the head of a delegation going to Golda Meir's funeral in Israel, and she was the head of the delegation. Now, there's a character. You ask anybody in that Carter family, they're going to tell you that lady is a character. Anyway, when she walked on the airplane, her first statement to me is, "I'll have a bourbon and branch."
Right on.
Right. Well, I knew what the bourbon was, but I didn't know what the branch was. Well, it's a Southern term for water, branch water and things of that nature, right? So, and later on, she was playing cards with the senators in the front of the airplane and taking their money and giggling, and then going back with the Secret Service, taking their money and giggling. And she was in the back of the airplane. Somebody wanted a souvenir, and she asked me for a pair of scissors, and she cut her slip on her shoulders and took her slip off and gave it to him as a souvenir.
That's
what fantastic. A pistol. Oh, my God. Yeah. That is fantastic.
So at 3:00 in the morning, now you guys remember Billy Carter? You heard of that?
Oh, Billy Beer.
Yeah. Anyway, so at 3:00 in the morning, we went into Madrid. We refueled the airplane in Madrid, and we're going across the Mediterranean. It's 3:00 in the morning, heading for Israel. And this gracious character of a lady is sitting next to me on the jump seat at the back of the 707. And she's explaining to me how she's still in awe of her son being president. Rightly so. And it was new in the Carter administration. And then she said to me, she said, Howie, because it's kind of funny because when the two boys were going to school, Jimmy had to work a lot harder to get the same grades that Billy got.
That's awesome.
I said, oh dear.
Right.
But you go. I have confirmed that with everybody in the Carter, their friends and their relatives, and Rosalind's sister, that Billy was supposed to be more academically inclined than Jimmy. But he liked to tell stories and drink beer and sit in the back of his pickup truck.
Sure. Okay. Well, you got to do what you like to do in life. That's a good thing, but okay. The other one I had, actually Jeff Moss sent this question in, is if you could tell us about, I guess Nancy Reagan asked the Secret Service to tell President Reagan that riding horses may not be the best thing for his health.
Yeah, when we were out there in that 2 years after we left office, and I said we saw President Reagan for 45 minutes, and he was sharp as can be. And John Boletta, who just died, and he wrote a book also. And I had shared this story before John had even read the book to Jeff about it. And then he read the book. He said, well, Howie's not bullshitting me. So anyway, John Boletta said, and he told us, and he said, it's getting, this is a couple of months after we had seen him in California. It's getting more unsafe for him riding the horses. Now, this is the passion of this man's life. And, with passion, aviators are passionate about aviation, correct?
Right.
So this guy's passionate about riding horses. He said it was getting unsafe, and he needs to curtail it. And he went to, because he's getting to a point where he doesn't know really what's going on and things of that nature. So John's main mission is to keep the president safe. And he went to Nancy Reagan and he said, Miss Reagan, we have to curtail the horseback riding because, and Mrs. Reagan said to him, John, well, you tell him, which was probably the right thing to do because they had a professional relationship and a personal relationship. And John said that, and it's in his book and it's in my book, they were walking through a park. That's the way I remember it. And he turned to the president and said, you understand about your disease. You understand how it's going to come on. You understand that, and more graciously than I'm saying right now.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And, there's going to be times where you're not going to realize and it's going to attack you. And it's a safety issue riding the horses, and we have to curtail the horseback riding. And John told me his first response after telling him, taking away the passion of the man's life.
Yeah.
Reagan's first response was to console John for having to tell him that.
Wow.
I don't care about your politics. That's somebody.
Yeah. What a gentleman. Wow.
That's leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. He knew he understood completely how difficult it was for John to having to tell him that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's true leadership.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see, because we all see these men through the lens of, now it's all cable news, but for the most part, but we all see these men through the lens of what the media decides to put out there.
Yeah,
and
he was a guy.
Yeah,
okay?
It's nice to see them as the human beings that you saw them as.
Well, one of the stories I usually don't tell, we were going up to Connecticut early in the Reagan administration. They were building nuke subs up there, so Reaganomics was working, see? So, and they had a Congress lady that was with us for her district up there. And when we landed up there, the advance officer came up and said, Chief, we can't fly the helicopters. We were supposed to fly the helicopters, but the fog has set in, so we got to bring up the motorcade. There's going to be a few minutes delay to get the motorcade lined up to come up. And by the way, it's a 45-minute ride. And I said, well, thank you. So I went in and briefed the president those statements. And I said, so there's no rush. And so I come out of the stateroom, and Jimmy Kuhn, who's the appointment secretary for the president, sharp guy. I mean, sharp looking, sharp smiling, on top of everything. And Jimmy Kuhn standing there, and the Congress lady comes up to depart with the president off the airplane. And I said to the Congress lady, and she was a nice looking lady, no Marilyn Monroe, but nice looking, dressed well and and I explained to her that there's going to be a delay and the motorcade's coming up. And I said, ma'am, by the way, it's a 45-minute ride. You may want to use the restroom before you go. And she goes up to the restroom. And so when she's in the restroom, the president comes down to the stateroom. Jimmy Kuhn now briefs the president what I told the Congress lady. The president turns to the window, and the press is all down the bottom of the stairs. And he says to Jimmy Kuhn, he says, Jimmy, is Sam Donaldson down there? Jimmy looks, he says, yeah, Sam's down there. He says, okay, send Howie out, let him yell down. There'll be a few minutes delay. And when I come out with this good-looking Congress lady, I'll be pulling my zipper up. Okay. Now, when he talks, you believe him.
Right. Wait, who?
Jimmy Kuhn's having a heart attack. He's pressing on the president's shoulder. Sir, you can't do that. And the president's winking at me, So what I'm saying, he's a guy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! What? Hold on. We're talking about President Reagan, right?
Reagan, right?
Oh my gosh, that is. Well, he had an amazing sense of humor, right? I mean that just perfectly
He did.
shows
Yeah.
And he'd always want to tell you a story. I said President Bush went and met with him while we were out in California. I said, did he tell you a story? He said, oh yeah, he's going to tell you a story. He loved telling you a story. When President Bush was inaugurated and Reagan was no longer president, 2000, we're now flying him to California. And we were about 30 minutes out of LA, maybe a little more. And I went into the stateroom and I said, sir, would you like to make the last landing with us? And he said, sure, that'd be fine. So we walked out of the stateroom, and again, the side pouches and the windows are there. And we're flying over the Los Angeles area, flying over, I think it was Orange County. And he said, Howie, you want to see where all the Republicans live? I said, yes, sir. He looks out, he said, you see all those swimming pools down there?
Okay.
So anyway, we escort him up to the cockpit. And the pilot's seat, the co-pilot, flight engineers to the right, and navigators to the left with his head to the bulkhead. And there's right behind the pilot seat, there's an observer seat.
Right.
And we set the president in the observer seat. And I can see LAX way out in front of us. The gear's not down yet, but I can see LAX in the ocean because it's a clear day. And it's a little quiet. Actually, Reagan starts telling us a story, the whole crew. He said, you know, guys, a friend of mine my age, which was close to 80, I think, he said, convinced his wife and his doctor he wanted to donate to a sperm bank. Now, when I'm telling you this, if you can imagine Ronald Reagan telling a story, not me.
Yeah, right. Yes. Right?
So I'm saying, where the hell is this going to go? You know?
Right.
So he said he convinced the doctor and he went to the sperm bank with his wife. And he said the nurse there was a little concerned because of his age. You know, he's my age, my good friend. He said, and they gave him a jar and a magazine, and they took him to this room. Imagine Reagan telling the story. Okay?
Right.
And he said he was in there for 15 minutes, and the nurse is really nervous because of his age. He's in there 15 minutes. All of a sudden, it's 20 minutes, and she's getting even more nervous. Finally, 40 minutes goes by. Reagan says, and he comes out of the room and walks up to the nurse. He said, you know, ma'am, I did everything I could. He said, I hid it on the side of the sinks. I ran hot water over it, but I just can't get the lid off this jar.
I did not see that coming, Howie.
No,
we didn't either, you know.
I bet.
Did everything I could. I ran hot water over it. I hit it on the sink.
I hope you get what I'm trying to get a point across. All of these gentlemen are just as real as you and I.
Oh, sure. You bet.
Believe me, very much. They hurt, they bleed, they cry, they feel.
Yeah.
Well, I do know the one Reagan story was, you know, he says, I hope you're all Republicans when he was about to go under surgery, you know. Yeah.
Well, one time we were going to Texas, and he was running a little late. And he came up to me real close, and he said, Howie, they're sending me to Texas. I said, yes, sir. He said, yeah, but they send me to a turkey shoot. I said, well, yes, sir. He said, I don't know why they send me to Texas. I got enough turkeys in Washington. If we were going to California, if we were going to Ohio, he'd say, we're going in the right direction, but we're not going far enough. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So one time we're going to California, and he says, he was in the conference room, and the staff was on one end of the conference room doing work, and they finished their work. So they start making small talk. The president's by himself on the other end of the conference room, maybe 6 feet away. And he's writing notes and doing things and doing whatever. Nobody thinks he's paying attention to the discussion that's going on. And they decided they were talking about Hollywood at the time was considering making a life story movie of Mickey Rooney. And at the time, Mickey Rooney was alive. Okay. And so then the discussion goes on about, and finally it comes out to wonder who they're going to get to play Mickey Rooney. And they mentioned a couple of names. And then somebody in the group said, why don't they get Mickey Rooney to play Mickey Rooney? And the president turned to the group and said, he's too short.
Oh, hang on. So my internet froze, and I don't know if we're going to get that because of the uploading thing that's going on. We left off. Last I heard was somebody suggested. So who was going to play?
They said the people in their small talk suggested wondered who they're going to play to get to play Mickey Rooney.
Right.
And so they mentioned a few names, and somebody in the group finally said, "Well, why don't they get Mickey Rooney to play Mickey Rooney?" And the president turned to the group and said, "He's too short."
That's fantastic.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
Fantastic. Gosh, this is amazing, Howie. Just truly amazing. It's like listening to, it is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A witness to history.
What I always try to say, they're all real people, I mean, they very much so.
So you've got a website, HowieFranklin.com. And how many books do you have? Are you one or two?
I got one out, and it's HowieFranklin.com. Yes, sir, Mr. President.
That's it.
I was on when Candace Brown introduced talked to me on 27000 taking it to California. My wife and myself was in their Rolodex. So during the Bush administration, his second administration, they had a big thing on presidential and elections, and they had a mock-up of Air Force One on the Today Show, and they invited my wife and I to do an interview. And remember, it's show business like you guys are in. So they asked me to write down 5 questions they'd like me to ask them, like them to ask me, and the answers, and which I did, and my wife did also. And we did a nice interview with Al Roker. At the end of his interview, he said, "Howie, I'd love to hear the rest of your stories." So I got picked up by APP Speakers Bureau. And we're talking about Tom Brokaw and Gorbachev and Howie Franklin. Are you kidding me? And they said I was the cheapest, best speaker they had. So I spoke around the country, and my wife was there at some of my speeches, and people would come up and say, "You need to write a book." And I thought they'd just being nice. And no, my wife said, "No, you got to write a book." So we wrote a book, and it'll make you laugh. One of the stories in there, gentlemen, you were in the Marine Corps. When I was 20 and I got drafted, and I'm in basic training, and we're in Texas. And my TI, all due respect, was kind of an alcoholic, and my group stayed by themselves most of the time. He wasn't in the barracks. And, you're not supposed to do anything they don't let you do, especially go to the patio and have a Coca-Cola.
Sure.
And so my buddy, everybody else was probably a little younger than us. And my buddy says to me, "You got balls?" He said, "Why don't you go over to the patio area and get us 2 Cokes?" I said, "Sure, I can do that." So I walk over. I'm in fatigues, not supposed to have anything in your pockets or anything like that. I walk over to the patio area. I've been there about 2 weeks. So, I took having a Coke was nothing, but now it's really special, right?
Yeah.
And it was the 8-ounce bottles. And I bought a Coke for me, and I drank it immediately, and it was luxurious. Okay. And Texas was San Antonio in August and September, it's 110 degrees.
Yeah, but at least it's humid.
Yeah. And the ground's cracking. I'd never seen the ground crack. Anyway, so now I put 2 more Cokes, and how am I going to get them back to the barracks across this area? So I stuck them in my pockets, sticking out my pants pockets. And I'm walking across the area, and this TI from another group, not mine, saw me, and this guy starts salivating. He's excited.
You bet. Oh, boy.
Yeah, he comes over to me and jumps, "Airman, a report." And I jump to attention and salute, and he returned the salute, and I returned my salute. And he said, "What is the outrageous? Well, you know better. You're not supposed to be carrying anything in your pockets." And he went on, and I said, "Sir, I am a dipshit. I don't know how to drink soda properly. Until I learn how to drink soda properly, I have to carry these soda bottles around and tell everybody I'm a dipshit."
You clever son of a bitch. That's awesome.
Did he buy that? Did he buy that?
He loved it.
Oh,
Are you kidding me? The guy, he salivated. Anytime you were belittling yourself, and it was true, he believed it. So we and Jack went back to the barracks, and we put our feet up. We're drinking this Coke, and I said, "That guy's going to tell his friends tonight. You should have seen the asshole I saw today. This dipshit with the 2 bottles of soda." And I said, we toasted to each other with the soda. So do we give a shit if he thinks we're a dipshit or not?
That's great.
So stories like that, and all kinds of stuff with Secretary of State, Secretary of Defenses, and things like that are in the book.
Howie, how many hours of flying did you log?
I don't know. I need to do that. It's thousands, more than most people.
I would probably be not surprised that you have an airline pilot kind of log.
25, 30,000 hours.
Yeah, I think it's more than that. Actually, wow. I need to go check that out. But
how many active duty years did you have?
29.
Holy shit. Okay.
And
he only had to extend 25 years after his initial commitment.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, I wanted out. I was a chief in the Air Force. I was not very military. I mean, I like what I did, and I like taking care of people. In 1965, when I got drafted, I was a surfer on Fire Island. And we were kind of environmentalists where we didn't like people throwing trash on the ground or anything like that. And the only guys had long hair was me and my buddies and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. So I went in the Air Force, and my uncle cut my friend's hair and my hair, and he had a bucket full of hair. But I mean, I wasn't long down to my shoulders. I looked maybe like Elvis Presley's length of his hair when I had long hair.
Sure. And
they cut my hair, and I got pissed from that day forward. So we'd be in the barbershop at Andrews, and I'm the chief, and the young sergeants are sitting there next to me, and they'd hear me tell the barber, I need a haircut, but I don't want to look like I got a haircut.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I was not, I liked my job. I liked what I did. I liked the area. I liked my bosses. I mean, we had, like I said, my pilots had balls so big, it was incredible.
Can you be a little more specific about that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you an example. Colonel McClellan, who became when he retired as a chief pilot, he went to he was the president of Challenger up in Connecticut, up in Canada, stuff like that. Yeah. And he was a great pilot. He wore an airplane like a leather glove and could land like a leather glove. I mean, he was beautiful. He wasn't very military either. He was a farmer. If you wanted to talk to Colonel McClellan, tell him how's he doing rebuilding his John Deere tractor, he'd talk to you. But talking military stuff, he wasn't big on it. So my first trip with Jerry Ford, and we were going to SAC headquarters, and in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was my first time that I'm asking for a show and tell. Okay, bring some friends of mine on the airplane to see the airplane, and he said, and I was a little reticent to do that. I'm brand new on the crew, and he said, sure. He said he gave me the advance officer's name and number, and I called him. He said he'll tell him that I said to get your show and tell for your friends. So anyway, he did, and it was a master sergeant, his wife, and 2 kids, and he was the chief of maintenance in Omaha. So we land there in Omaha, and we got a block time. Air Force One is known. Whatever we publish, we're going to make that block time on the numbers. Okay?
And I'm guessing people don't tell you no very often.
No.
Just a guess.
So anyway, there's 22 generals on the ramp in Omaha that's based there at SAC headquarters. Okay. So anyway, the president left and the motorcades left, and I walk up front, and Colonel Mack's coming from up. He was down there talking to this general. He walks back up the stairs, and he said, he said to Chief Lopez, he said, the only guy authorized to show and tell is Franklin, and I'm out of here. Okay. And Joe said, why is that? He said, you know what that general said to me? And he said, what? He said, taxiing kind of fast, weren't you, Colonel?
No shit.
Oh.
And the colonel said, I don't want to use the F word.
That's okay. You can do that. It's okay.
We're explicit. Here it comes.
The colonel says to the general, he said he didn't. He said, I smiled and walked back upstairs. He said, I should have told him this wasn't one of his fucking SAC bombers.
Right?
Right? Yeah. We don't belong to you, right?
Yeah. But thanks for the advice. Oh, man. Fantastic.
So there's 22 generals sitting there, the big guys.
Yeah.
Strategic Air Command, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So they escort this master sergeant, his wife, and 2 kids out to the airplane. They go up on the airplane. I give them a show and tell. They walk off with a paper bag with some souvenirs from the airplane. And some young captain runs up to Frank and said, sir. He said, what? He said, you need transportation anywhere? He said, no. He said, why? He said, because you got to know somebody, he said.
All right.
None of the generals got on the airplane.
That's fantastic.
Too funny.
So,
Well,
so
go ahead, Fig.
well, I was just going to say for our listeners that aren't aware of this, when Air Force One is moving, everything stops. So they clear airspace, they stop things on the ground. So yeah, you're going to make your block time because everything's out of your way, right?
Yeah, well, the one thing that all presidents miss when they leave is Air Force One.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
And for many reasons, the primary reason is they're number one for takeoff.
Always.
Yeah.
You're never waiting for a takeoff slot. You're never waiting for a landing slot.
What are you doing in LaGuardia? And you're not, you're just the next president.
They don't sit in traffic jams. They don't,
Nope.
and they don't hold on the in the hold short. But holy smokes!
Yeah, I can unfortunately say I've been on the other end. I've been on the receiving end of that multiple times, and it's not pleasant. But hey, that's the cost of doing business sometimes.
We had Bacchus on the show at one point. He was an air traffic controller, retired Boston Center supervisor, and one of the jokes they played on one of his supervisors once is he leaned over and said. Pretended to key the mic. Air Force One was coming into Boston. He pretended to key the mic, and he saw his supervisor standing behind him, and his supervisor didn't know it. He goes, Air Force One, need you to tighten up your turn there. The supervisor's like, no, you can't do that. He goes, gotcha. So, but yeah, because it's, in fact, we had Shyster on. He talked about, he did the logistics department, Bob Darling, and Bob, I guess. And he said, we just didn't get told no when we wanted something. So I can imagine that even though planning was difficult and tedious, that people jump through hoops to make it happen for you.
Well, we always were appreciative, as far as I know. That was the mission,
Sure. What was it harder overseas? How did you do that overseas when you needed food? You're in Cairo or you're in Moscow or whatever. Obviously, the State Departments work together and that sort of thing. But
well, usually you go to the American embassy. The embassy in Moscow, when we walk in, they'd scream. So, because they know we're going to clean them out. They knew us. The 707 was very difficult because we didn't have the refrigeration set up. Now, when we built the 747, Chief Haig was the chief. I was his deputy. Timmy was my deputy. The 747. We were able to convince the Boeing to let the people who worked in their crew position get involved in the design of the layout of the airplane.
Brilliant.
That's smart.
And Mrs. Reagan is the one that picked out the decor of the airplane. I ran into a colonel that was in the Pentagon he said he got all the colors together on the new Air Force 1747 and Air Force colors. They're blues and grays and light blues and stuff like that, and the materials, and brought it to Nancy Reagan in the White House. And she looked at it and she said, "Oh, that's very nice, but don't you think it ought to be a desert motif?" Guess what? It was a desert motif.
Yeah, funny how that works, huh?
Yeah. What are the odds? Beautiful.
But yeah, it's the airplane is just, we were able to, the galleys, I think, on Air Force One are probably the best galleys in the whole world. Timmy did an incredible job on them. We looked at, I said, you got to think about how the meal's getting prepared and going out and how the meal's coming back. And flow process charts and things of this nature. And our motivation was on 27000 or 26000, if you ever get a chance to see the airplane, go look at the front galley. Some engineer designed it that never cooked a meal. It looked nice. It looked nice, but it was a piece of crap. So that's why we were highly motivated to get involved in the galleys. The other thing was, we had good refrigeration and freezers in the galleys in the front and the back of the airplane. But in the front of the airplane, we can go downstairs to the belly, and we had two huge refrigerators and two huge freezers. I mean, they were like 6 foot deep with shelves that can pull out. And in the back of the airplane for the back galley, two big refrigerators and freezers. And guess what? We got a separate APU sitting on the airplane, keeping the refrigeration going all the time.
Yep.
Because remember, our job is to not to not have anything that's been consumed on the airplane been tampered with. Now,
Sure.
I used to tell the State Department, and they got a little tight. There was a lady named Jeannie Bull, and she was the one that we paid to do the trip. And we were going somewhere, and I said, Jeannie, we got to have a second meal on the airplane. We always do in case we got a side trip, you know? So she said, no, we can't afford that. So anyway, we're on the trip, and we're in Paris. And she calls me at 10 o'clock at night, and she says, Howie, we got a side trip. We're going to Saudi. I said, oh. I said, I'm not the type of guy to tell you I told you so. So you don't have to worry about that. However, I got to buy a meal in Saudi Arabia. And a friend of mine that used to be in our outfit worked for the Prince of Saudi Arabia, Prince Bandar, and he was in and out of there. So he was in Washington. From Paris, I called him. I said, you got to put me in touch with the King's caterer.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, we got into Saudi Arabia. In other words, I needed a meal coming out of Saudi Arabia. And I really didn't like that idea. And so anyway, but we got with the Kings, and I had to go through 4 different stages of people and have tea before I got to the head guy.
Oh my
Right.
gosh.
Very social.
And they
Oh
all,
my God.
they will, you know, they all, every step the people dress nicer. So,
Yeah.
and then Jeannie Bull says to me from the State Department, I says, you know, they're going to offer to pay for this. Okay. They're going to offer to pay for this. And what am I going to do? She said, you got to say no 5 times. I said, okay. I know they're going to offer to pay for it. You know, I mean, that's guaranteed. Sure. So anyway, we get in there, and Timmy's with me, my deputy, and we're ordering some stuff. And I said in front of the head guy of this catering outfit was treating his people like they were dogs. I mean, it was just obvious. Just, my God. The way difference between we treated our people and the way he was treating his people. Mm-hmm. So as we were going through there, and I mentioned, well, we got to be careful about the price. And he said, no, we're paying for it. I said, okay. Remember, I was supposed to say 5 times. And then my deputy goes, yeah, we'll have a case of this and 2 cases of that.
Fantastic. We'll
take it. The other one was we were in Moscow, and Jeannie calls me up. This is another trip. And we're in Moscow on another trip. And she calls me up and said, we got a side trip to Zagreb, and we need a lunch on the airplane. Now, this was after the communists supposed to have left. You know, the communist wall fell, but it didn't get rid of all the communists. You know that, don't you?
Right.
Yeah.
And all over the world. Anyway, so she calls me and we need a lunch meal. So we're staying in a hotel that was owned by Canada, and the head guy of the hotel went to CIA, which we did. And he had a Russian roommate, so he learned Russian, and he got the job over running this first-class hotel in Moscow. And I ended up bringing the Navy cooks in to observe whatever was being prepared and done for the president and the crew and the staff. So I'm talking to the manager of this big hotel, and I said, what kind of management problems do you have? He said, number one, I have nuclear physicists out here mopping the floor for me. And he said, number two, he said, they're all jealous of anything that anybody has. And this was early on. They still didn't have much. I mean, I remember growing up, guys, I'm older than you, that Russia was this big threat.
Right.
Well, first time I got in there in 70, I realized it was a third world country.
Right. Yeah.
And so anyway, he said, first, they're all jealous of everything that they have. They steal everything. I have to lock up the cocktail napkins. He said, and the other one is they're all alcoholics, and they're all sleeping with each other's wives. What kind of man? I said, it sounds like my old outfit back in the 70s. So, anyway.
Wow. I totally understand that, having touched small areas around that.
Well, the Russians said to me in 1970 when I got in there, this was under the communists, And I like to talk to the people. The most interesting thing I ever saw in Moscow was the Moscow War Museum.
Oh,
Their
tell me about
position,
Yes,
their position
yes.
on how they perceived their World War II.
Yes.
And then in the museum, they had the missile that shot down Powers.
Right.
And
Right.
underneath the missile, they had his flight jacket and his gun and something else that
Sure.
was on display there.
Whoa,
Sure.
What do we do?
that's.
I
Oh, I'm
love
Now-
back. Yeah,
now,
my
are
camera
you-
was off briefly.
Are you
Hey,
still
Mike.
there? Uh-oh. Howie, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
How-
you, but I'm lost. Hold on a second.
Okay. Well, we'll take this opportunity to thank Robbie again here, and we got about 2.5 minutes. We'll do that. I'll edit this part out of the show. So let me get that. You going to come back, Fig? 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be
All right,
wonderful.
Here we go. We'll run Howie.
All right.
I mean Robbie, Howie, somebody. So there I was, flying high, thinking my retirement was locked in, running smooth, no adjustments needed. Then it hit me. Retirement planning isn't something you can just put on autopilot. You can't just set it and hope for the best. If you're not actively steering, you could be drifting off course without even realizing it. That's why pilots who get it turn to HSI Wealth Strategies. These guys aren't your typical financial advisors. They're pilots. Military, airline, guard, civil. They've sat where you're sitting. They understand the unique financial landscape pilots face, from high-earning years to the minefield of taxes and inflation waiting downrange. And here's the kicker. On average, they're saving pilots $1 million or more just by making smart course corrections. The earlier you start working with them, the more opportunities they have to reduce your lifetime tax burden and keep more of your hard-earned money where it belongs. But don't worry, even if you're closer to your Centrum Silver years, they have the expertise to help make the most of your approach to retirement. Now, let me ask you something. If your airplane was leaking fuel mid-flight, would you ignore it and hope you still had enough to make it to your destination? Of course not. You'd act immediately. Your retirement is no different. If you're not taking control now, you could be watching your hard-earned money evaporate through unnecessary taxes and inefficient planning. And listen, we all know the classic joke. How does a pilot make $1 million? Well, he starts with $2 million and manages it himself for 6 months. Funny? Yes, but humor has truth to it, and this one is painfully true. So here's your wake-up call. This is your moment right now. You have a choice. You can keep hoping your retirement lands smoothly, or you can take action and get a real strategy from people who know exactly what it takes to make it work for pilots. Call Robbie Walling at 214-538-7030. That's 214-JET-7030. Or email robert.walling@nm.com. That's robert.walling, WALLING, at novembermike.com. Because when it comes to your financial future, you only get one final approach, and there are no go-arounds. HSI Wealth Strategies. Pilots guiding pilots to a smooth landing in retirement.
Lost it? Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
All right.
Okay.
Well,
No problem.
we've got you. Is there a problem?
Yeah, we're working.
Okay.
There you go. How's that?
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. All right.
Let me throw something out. You just advertised. I got at the Cape Fear Regional Jetport, Wings and Wheels, April 12th. That means we're going to have airplanes. We're going to do a Young Eagle program for the kids. We have hot rods. So we got airplanes and hot rods.
Oh, fantastic. All right. April 12th. I don't know if I can make it down there for that or not. I'll certainly give that a shot here. That's coming up in a week. All right. Next Saturday.
Yeah, we do a lot
Okay.
of that.
All right.
Give me an example. You guys are pilots. We do a Young Eagle program. Many years ago, we were on the other side, small terminal building, and this little black girl stopped by. She was 10 years old with her aunt and uncle, saw a sign, said, "Come fly today." And so she came in, wondered what we were talking about, and we have the Cessnas, and then we had some 2-seater airplanes, and she ended up in a 2-seater airplane.
Okay.
Which if she was the 4-seater airplane, she may not be able to do it. Well, she got to fly the airplane. And she got what you guys got. She got passionate about it. She loved it.
Yeah.
Came back a couple of times. And whenever she was in a freshman year in high school, she came and mentored with me for a whole day at the airport. She went home that Friday and talked to her family, extended family, aunts and uncles, and her neighbors. They all chipped in for flight lessons for her. Remember, passion for flying. She soloed. She got into our flight school here, which we now have 100 students in our flight school. And she came in and she soloed before she graduated from high school. And she went, at that time, she went to Embry-Riddle with hard work and some of our help. And she graduated about 8 years ago as the top pilot in the class with a 4-point average. Now, her passion for flying drove the grades. You get it?
Oh,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. She's now a commercial pilot flying out of Philadelphia and contacts me only because she saw a sign said, "Come fly today." How, to
That's
me, it's
awesome.
fantastic.
That
That's a
is
great story, Howie.
fantastic. It is. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that Embry-Riddle does not give that away. So if either of you has $250,000 I can borrow, and by borrow I mean have and not give back, just let me know so I can pay off Embry-Riddle.
Hey, no problem. No problem, buddy.
My girl who again grades, she didn't have the best grades in high school, and I said, if you bring me all A's, you can get your private license between your junior and senior year. I like to say I should have promised something cheap like a pony.
Yeah. However, I tell these students, I said, if you go to, it costs you the same amount as going to 4-year state college to get a pilot's license. Only it'll take you 2 years versus 4 years. You're going to learn a lot more in pilot training than you're going to learn in any class of 4 years of college.
Absolutely.
And you're not only going to learn it, you're going to learn physics, you're going to learn math, you're going to learn weather, you're going to learn communications, and you're going to use it.
Yeah, you are.
That's not a lie. That's straight up fact.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Well, you before we went to thank Robbie the second time there for today, you were talking about being in Moscow and the museum and all that. What are some of the best downtime you got? Because I imagine that you weren't attached to the airplane 24/7 when you were overseas.
Well, remember I said Reagan was the most organized?
Sure.
He was also of the age group that you work from 9 to 5. Now, he's willing to work more than that if it's needed. But if it's not needed, you don't do stuff like that.
Okay.
So in 8 years, we never took off any earlier than 9:30.
Well, that's nice.
And we landed somewhere around 5:30 for cocktails.
That's gentlemanly schedule right there.
Yeah.
Right?
And he was very good and good to the crew. Have you ever been to Bali?
I have
Never.
not.
Nope.
Been to the Hawaiian Islands and Wake. Been to Wake.
I've been awake also. But Bali's beautiful. Barbados was beautiful. And, when if we went to Moscow or wherever we went, the president goes to work and we're off duty.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And
Your job is getting there.
yeah, and they would, we went, when we go to Moscow, they were very good in their protocol. We would go to the ballet, and then we go to the circus, and we go all this stuff, and they all treated us very nice. Now, back in the 70s, my favorite thing to do when the Russian airplane crew came in, I'd take them to the local supermarket.
Yeah.
I saw a pilot cry.
Yeah, because of
I believe
all
it.
because they didn't have that kind of variety, right?
No, I remember in the square there. They had, this is during the communist. There was a line that was probably 8 to 9 people wide, and it was a quarter of a mile long, and they were getting their distribution of meat.
Wow.
Okay, and then you didn't ask for a cut.
No.
The guy'd hack you off a piece of meat, and it was probably close to being rotten because they had no refrigeration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's.
I remember telling the press when we're flying into Moscow, count your refrigeration vehicles. Well, the thing is, and I remember going to Moscow for the first time, went into a men's store. It looked like the worst thrift store you ever went into in your life. And the men's pants had buttons. That's because if you invented a zipper, you didn't make any more money.
Okay.
And the Russians people used to say, the government pretends to pay us, so we pretend to work.
Tend to work.
That's education that I have traveling around the world, and was beyond valuable.
What you didn't talk about, you talked about where everybody else was on the airplane, but on the long hauls especially, you guys had to take breaks and that sort of thing. What were the crew quarters like on Air Force One?
Well, in the back of the airplane, on one side is in the stern of the airplane. One side is the press area. The other side is a crew area, and every seat is a first class seat that reclines very reasonable. And if they got a chance to sleep, they do that. Up in the 747, when you walk first upstairs, there's several radio operators. I think there's 4 radio operators now. It's probably more than that. It used to be we could make 85 telephone calls at one time off the airplane, and we also had secure voice. And from the radio operator area, walk into the crew area, which is a table with a TV and 4 first-class chairs, and then there's 4 bunks across the way. If I was the chief running the airplane and I'm responsible for everything goes on, go take a nap. I don't think so. When I could sleep on an airplane, it was a long day and I was tired.
Right. Okay. When, how long were you the HMFIC on Air Force One?
During the half of the Bush administration and half of the Clinton administration.
Okay.
So I worked for Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton. He's guilty, but he's a nice guy.
Which one? All of them. Okay.
Well, one of the jokes I had with him after he left office, he has contacted me several times, and the golf story about playing at down in Durrell. One of his stewards after I left, Steve Lomanak, lives here also on the golf course. So Timmy was flying NetJet, and he ran into him, and Timmy called me and said, "Hey, the president asked about you." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Is Howie still in North Carolina?" And Timmy said, "Not only is Howie in North Carolina, but Steve's in North Carolina. They both live on a golf course. Steve works on the golf course, so they're both playing free golf." President said, "Who didn't know that shit?" So 3 months later, a gentleman, one of my customers from upstate New York, Hillary was being placed in some special organization, and the president was there, and the gentleman had donated the place for the event, and the president was coming to his house for a meet and greet, and I had given him an Air Force One golf ball, so he sent me a picture and told him what to say. So 3 months later, after Timmy had talked to the president, he walks into this house in Seneca Falls, and he said, "Timmy and Howie say hello from North Carolina. They both live on a golf course. Steve works on a golf course, so they're both playing free golf." And the president said, "I've been hearing that shit all over the world."
Oh, fantastic. Wow.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I had a good time in my military career.
Howie, you have had an amazing career in the military.
Right.
Just truly amazing and
I'm jealous.
Unique. It's like one of a kind. It really is.
Absolutely. And remember, I was going to get in and get out. I mean, I lived in Bayport, Long Island, New York. Roosevelt, I played in his house when I was a kid. I had made more money when I was 20 years old, half a year in the Air Force and half a year as a civilian in 1965, and then a 20-year staff sergeant in the Air Force made.
How about that? So,
it was. I couldn't wait to get out. I couldn't wait to go home. Now, if I lived in a little place in some place in the woods where I didn't like, it'd be a different story.
Right.
It was. I wanted to get home as fast as I could.
Sure.
And get back at it.
I mean, when I got drafted, I was clearing $110 a week. After taxes, I had driving a 1960 Chevrolet Impala convertible in 1965. I had a gorgeous girlfriend who was giving me all the affection I wanted, and life was great. And I got drafted.
Yeah, and everything kind of went to shit all of a
The
sudden.
hell, yeah.
Yeah, I get it. You wanted to get back. You wanted to get back and get at it.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Well, it looks like it all worked out pretty damn spectacular, just the way it was supposed to.
Well, this
Yep.
airport, the airport here, the Cape Fear Jetport, it was Brunswick County Airport. Now, what we have here, and several of us that live here are a little frustrated because everybody's moving here. According to Virginia Tech, we get the best weather on the coast from Maine to Key West. We have 60 miles of beach, 39 golf courses, and they're all coming in. I got the other day I had 4 Gulfstream 650s sitting on the ramp, and they weren't chartered. They all owned them. One from San Francisco, one from Dallas, one from Teterboro, one from Connecticut. Now they're all billionaires. They're coming here. That means everybody else that's already here are geniuses because they're not stupid people that's coming in here.
Right.
We're as far as operations and landings and takeoff, we're number 4 in the state of North Carolina, according to FAA. Charlotte's number 1, Raleigh's number 2, Greensboro's number 3, and Cape Fear Jetport's number 4. Our economic impact when I got here was $40,000 a year. It's now $557 million a year economic impact, and $38 million goes to the county. So we're having fun. And oh, my guys that's refueling, they get 8 cents a gallon for every gallon of gas they sell. So they have ownership.
Yeah.
Okay. So and our reviews for customer service are off the wall because my guys, they have ownership, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
So their joke is they're kissing ass and selling gas.
Right.
And we take great care of the Marines. They come through here all the time.
Oh, the Harriers here, yeah. The last VMA 223 is our old squadron. It's the last Harrier squadron. I know they're in there a lot because Badass, our photographer, takes a lot of pictures of them down there.
Yeah, well, they and something that I don't want the locals to know. If they come in, Marines come in, we want to know how many crew they all get pizzas and Coca-Cola. My chairman of my board is 82nd Airborne, full colonel, Purple Heart recipient. And if people complain about the noise, his statement is it's the sound of freedom.
Right on.
And we take care of the troops. So
fantastic. Love it.
Yeah,
Well,
we're doing great. We're enjoying ourselves. But I mean, my guys have bought into we're in the customer service business. The fact that we move airplanes, refuel airplanes, put them in and out of hangars, those are tasks that we do safely. But basically, we're in the customer service business.
So, hey, Howie, how long is this? Are you running it? Do you own it? What?
No, I run it it's an independent municipality. We're like any other town. We're not a county airport. So I'm here 32 years. Wow. And I've loved every minute of it. Well, and you're winning, this friend, one time, Henry Kister, they were talking about, we were doing that shuttle diplomacy between Damascus and we fly from Tel Aviv to Damascus and we sit on the ground and we got to be ready to go hour by hour. It's none of this. You're going to be sitting here for 5 hours or whatever it is, hour by hour. Sometimes it would be 18 hours.
Yeah. And you're basically on call, ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and everybody was sick. The staff was sick. A couple of my navigator was sick. The press was sick. And they asked Henry, they said, how do you do it? He's got all this energy. He said, when you're on the high wire and you're winning, you got more energy. And you ever play Monopoly late at night where you're more happy and wide awake when you're winning other than the guy that's losing?
Right.
Sure.
So it reinforces itself.
Right. Oh, fantastic.
Well, Howie, listen, I can't put into words how awesome it's been listening to your stories.
Right.
We've been going almost 2.5 hours, and I I'm so grateful and humbled that you are sharing this with us.
Well, Jeff Boss is a good friend and a good partner of mine, so I'm glad he was able to get you that. Hey, looking for guys, that pilot I was talking about, the Air Force pilot that punched out here.
Yes.
I'm on the Speakers Bureau, Aviation Speakers Bureau, and
Yes.
he's in there. If you look up Aviation Speakers Bureau, you'll see him. And he would be somebody to, I mean, you're talking about everything that he went through, and then he's healed and stuff like that. Can you imagine punching out straight down and you're going full speed?
Nope.
No, you don't want to do that. That's you're glad to have that handle if you need it, but you don't want to use
it. You better tuck yourself. You know that.
Yeah.
So
fantastic,
guys. It's been fantastic. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Well, Howie, thank you. Yeah,
it's been amazing.
It has been. So we're going to take a minute here to land this airplane, say a couple thank yous, and then we're going to go to our Patreon extra story for everybody who has lost control of their mental faculties and give us money. So first of all, thank you for your service to our country, to the presidents, to make it easier for them to do a difficult job under the best of circumstances. We're grateful that you decided to extend beyond your initial 4 years by a couple of decades and a half.
So did I.
Yeah. Thank you to Dave Hamilton over at Backbeat Media online. Backbeatmedia.com handles our advertising. We're appreciative of what they do for us. And while I'm saying our thank yous, I forgot to say thank you to all veterans and active duty for their service, and of course their families who make it possible. Any other? Oh, and I didn't say thank you to Dave and Sadie at Backbeat Media Online. They helped make this happen. So, any other thank yous there, Fig?
Well, he lives in the backyard of our friend Howie now. Brad Silcott, BDS Aviation, aka Badass. Thank you for providing all the photos that you do for us.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much. Hey, we would appreciate if you would go to sotherewas.us/giveaway. One of the things you can do over there is give us a 5-star rating, and the April giveaway is up. Win a So There I Was show banner beach towel. The 5-foot beach towel done for you. Those things are gorgeous. I happen to have one. I love mine. And one of the things you do, give us a 5-star rating. It's not that hard. Doesn't cost you anything, and you get a chance now to win a little bit of show merch.
And if you can't give us 5 stars, tell us why, because we're trainable.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you want to buy some merch, if you don't happen to win at sotherewas.us/giveaway, you can get your own show merch. Shot glasses, beer glasses, koozies, a clock, a beach towel. I don't know. Anything else there, Fig, you think that...
Well, it's approaching bikini season. And we have a So There I Was bikini.
We do indeed.
It's pretty nice.
With a QR code right on the front of the bottom, because you want people pointing cameras at that one. Yes. So, I don't know. There's no ejection seat handle, no collective, none of that crazy stuff. But I think, until... we got one more thank you.
Well, that's the two, that's the two F-16 pilots that make the Air Force sound good. That's the Dos Gringos. Thank you to the Dos Gringos for letting us use your music.
Right. It's fantastic music. 4 albums, not a bad one in the bunch. Amazon Music, Spotify, it's all there. But anyway, everybody, until next week, stay safe and check 6. See ya!
So repeat.
Yeah, I'm going to get it on the close. Here we go. We'll do this.
Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. 'Cause when you're going down the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
Hold on. What'd he say, Fig?
He said it's over.
If I knew I was going to meet the president, I would have worn a tie. I mean, look at me.
We're out. All right. I'm going to end the stream, everybody, because I don't have local recordings today. Long story, but that's my bullshit story, and I'm stuck with it. So thank you for being here with us. Take care, and God bless.
See ya.